regardless in the war. The legions in our hearts, shed waters in our balls. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded. The teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. With the semblance of a blaze, with gratitude and rage, we touch another page with delirious delight, impervious to light. This vitality and might encourages the flight. Preachers and bandits with means underhanded, the teachers pedantic and lack understanding. So sweep out the sand with the broom in your hand. Stand up, make we burn Babylon. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Guess I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. But the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Cause I can give the world to you, but the falling of the curtain is for certain. Be careful where you lurking, demon searching. The spirit and the women fight the battle within. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, welcome, 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 one and all. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're anything like me, you are intrinsically motivated. You do what you're going to do, regardless of external factors, external action, external outcomes. You are responsible for your discipline, your actions. You know that your actions are correlated with your outcomes. However, you also know, I also know that this is a psychological disposition. I know that this is how I strive. I know that not everyone is built that way. And I know that the land of collective action exists. And it is important. Also, I know that what brought me this far may not be sufficient to take me to the next steps. And thirdly, I know that it is very important to challenge our psychological predispositions. Again, if you're like me, you're intrinsically motivated. You are lift yourself by your bootstraps. I'm going to come here. I'm going to do my thing regardless of external outcomes and so on and so forth. But let me get a one in the chat if you understand what I mean by you need to challenge your psychological predispositions. You need to go out to the places where it's uncomfortable. I need to go out there into the land of the collective to find out what's going on over there because it exists. I cannot bury my head in the sand and say it does not exist. Part of growing up is becoming more responsible. Maybe you have a family and all of a sudden you realize that it's not all about you. All of a sudden you realize that you're part of a group that perhaps you have some or bear some responsibility for. So today I have with me someone else whom I believe is also on the same side of the ledger as myself. Someone whom is about intrinsic motivation, intrinsic discipline, pursuing your ends, having your particular individual action correlated with your particular individual results, and not talking about collective land. But today we are going to challenge ourselves. For the duration of this conversation, we're going to challenge ourselves, okay? And we're going to look at collective actions and outcomes compared with individual actions and outcomes. Why do we even measure these collective outcomes? What are they useful for? What are they useful for, ladies and gentlemen? And in order to have that conversation, I have Bernard Riley in the house, someone whom I described, and he will tell me if I'm wrong, as being more on the individual side of the ledger than on the collective side of the ledger. How are you doing, Bernard? And what do you think about what I've said so far? Did I make an accurate description of you, or am I capping, as they say?
Capping. I've only used that word one time in a sentence, and and if it wasn't for this whole YouTube space, I probably would not. That word would not be in my vocabulary. I had to look it up on Urban Dictionary. What is capping? I had no idea. But but no, I like what you said so far, and you did more or less describe me correctly. I think it does come down to individual actions. Even when people speak as a collective, it takes individuals to move in order for the collective to have something going on. And it ends up in a situation where we're saying it's a collective, but if it's truly a collective, that means individuals are subordinate to whatever is better for the overall collective group. Now, it's hard for us to sit here in a capitalist country and then say that, oh, we believe that we as a people should move as a collective. Now, individual actions can result in better collective outcomes, better outcomes for the group. But it takes individual actions. But if you commit solely to the collective aspect of it, then you get into a territory where individuals' rights, freedoms, liberties, and pursuit of happiness are infringed on to some degree, depending on how far you go with it. So that's just my baseline setup. My baseline setup to it, yeah.
Baseline setup. Now, I said something about a psychological disposition, which is what I'm trying to challenge myself on today, because I think the way you think, and I've acted in accordance with that, and it has gotten me this far so far. It actually works.
Yeah,
it actually works. However, as I mentioned, part of growing up has to do with you knowing that you have psychological predispositions and that they're not these God-given truths per se. And that the people who may be saying something else also are coming partially from a psychological predisposition, which they cannot do anything about. There are some people who are just like me and yourself. And it's not because necessarily we got it out of a book. It's just that that's how we were going to be no matter what, right?
Right.
Or do you disagree with that there's people who are more psychologically predisposed to be maybe more intrinsically motivated versus extrinsically motivated?
Yeah, I lean heavy on predisposition.
Good.
I think people are genetically hardwired to be a certain way. I do believe that person who's driven in America and they're making it really big in America. They're doing well. They're making good money. They started a business. They're industrious. I believe you take that same individual when they're 10 years old, drop them off in any country, they're going to be doing better than that, significantly better than the average in that country. I just think some people are just wired a certain way to just go get it. Now, there are things you can learn. Sometimes a culture can get filled up with a lot of bad information or bad traditions, But even with that, certain individuals born in the belly of that beast will still come out on top. So, but bad information can get administered into a culture and administered into some individuals. But you are right in the sense that you didn't have to learn in a book about your whole individual mindset of capitalism and striving and pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Now, some people do, but I think most people, it's in them. And even that it kind of was unearthed in some of the debates that we had here, that there were some guys who were on the more liberal side of the aisle when it came to politics. And then in the debate, somebody had to point out to him that, were you born rich? Were you born successful? The answer was no. And then so it was like, okay, you're a bootstrap guy yourself.
I like that one. I heard it. I've heard that a couple of times. I've heard that kind of argument happen a couple of times where somebody comes in and they start talking about the community and this and that, and then inevitably they get asked, right? Where did you come from? Because they keep talking about, the people that can't make it out of the hood and this and that. And then they get asked, well, were you rich in the hood? It was like, no. And we're like, well, how did you get out? and then it gets a little wonky. But I think it is great that that I assessed you the way that I did, because I think that it'll be a good conversation, therefore, because it is kind of trivial to have one person on the one side coming from the individual stance, another person from the other side coming from the collective stance. We've seen those kinds of quote unquote conversations or debates 1,000 times. But I think that if you have somebody or people, let's say like us, that are on this side of the fence, that sometimes there is a lot to be gleaned, a lot to be learned by us going to the other side of the street where we usually are not, because we have fresh eyes. And we're going to see certain things in collective land, as you have to say, vis-a-vis collective outcomes and collective action. Okay, that's how I'm trying to break down this conversation. We're going to start with outcomes first, and then we're going to talk about action, right? That we can both, number one, stretch ourselves, our boundaries out, and so on and so forth, and learn. But number two, that given the fact that we don't live there, we're going to see certain things, and we may be able to give some insights into the space of collective action and collective outcomes that the people who are naturally there by psychological predisposition will not, right? So that is why I specifically wanted to have this conversation with you, because it's just going to be obvious what's going to happen if I bring somebody who is on that side. Then it's just going to be, typical, the typical kind of thing. So let me just start out by saying this then, okay? Having said everything we've said so far, what is the usefulness of keeping track? We're starting out with outcomes. The outcomes, you can take any particular group, any particular data set, any particular distribution, okay? I don't care if it's a pile of leaves or a population of human beings. You can then slice it up into groups based on race, gender, ethnicity, tribes, whatever. And then you pick out attributes, okay? How tall are they? How rich are they? How educated are they? So on and so forth. We start measuring. And you are not a stranger to these measurements. I listen to your streams and you do present data. You talk about race loyalty today, for example, right? Yeah. And you have these charts. That's where people go in and they parse out groups and like, oh, white women over here, black women over here, this, that, and then they measure. What is the usefulness of the measuring of collective outcomes? Why do we care about it? Given what we have said, okay? We are people who are all about the individual stuff, but we do look at these numbers. You do talk about these numbers. How does that strike you, what I just said? Why do we go looking at these numbers? Is there any validity to them even, really?
Well, in America, we look at those numbers because the notion that we're all equal, endowed by a creator with inalienable rights and everything, that part right there, it causes us to look at the numbers because this is supposed to be a country of utter equality. But when we see disparities in the numbers based off race, based off gender, based off religion, height, or shoe size, whatever it is, if we see some disparities in the data, then what happens here is that we want to find the reasons for it. And that's where people go to the moon, in my opinion, where, okay, it's racism, it's sexism, it's anti this, it's misogyny, it's homo. Well, I don't want to get to trigger the algorithm, but we can think of all the bad words that it is that people use to blame that people blame all the disparities on. So that's why it's important to do it in America. And sometimes some of those things are legitimate. Sometimes, but then sometimes it's a lot of people reaching and making excuses for whether it's something wrong culturally. It's a number of different factors and a lot of different moving parts. But we have to understand if it's the case that I'm just throwing out the numbers. I don't even know the exact numbers on this, so I'm just making numbers up. If it's the case that 90% of white people graduate high school, but 70% of black people graduate high school, I think it's in our nature to just ask why. And so our pursuit to find the answers to the why is what leads us down to this path where we can look at all kinds of Pew Research, CDC stats, and find out the percentage of black men over 6'1" that got that get ingrown toenails or something. I mean, we got stats for everything out here. So that's how we end up going to the moon with all the stats and every little thing. The other aspect of it is, and I do believe it comes down to just hardwired tribalism. That part, and let me explain that one. When I see black people not doing as well in an area, I feel some type of way about it. Now, I could step back and say, hey, we're all Americans. It's a free country. We're capitalists. We live in a free capitalist democracy. You got to go out and get it. And some individuals get it and some individuals don't. But when a lot of those individuals who are not striving happen to be black, even though I can parse out a lot of the reasons why, I can break it down culturally what's going on, but I still feel some type of way about it. I think that's just natural tribalism that's kind of hard to shake. You know, I make this joke. I say it as a joke, but it's actually serious. If I'm watching a boxing match and I cannot know either one of those boxers, but if I see a white guy in the ring and a black guy in the ring, it's just a natural nature I have to root for the black guy. I can't help it. But and that's something that's just been hardwired into me. So I acknowledge I'm pretty good at acknowledging my hard wiring, but then taking a step back and saying, does this make sense in a modern, westernized, industrialized, civilized world? And a lot of times I can say, okay, this is what I felt from within, but my brain says, no, this is what actually makes sense. So I try to make decisions up here with my brain and then not try to look at my emotional reaction and then try to find a way to make it make sense. I try to get my emotion out of it and think with my brain and figure out what makes the most sense.
Well, I knew I made the right decision. Yeah, I knew I was going to have this I was having the conversation with the right person. So I think I like the honesty, right? I like the honesty and the transparency. Okay. So basically over here, you can see your favorite super chatter.
What's that? Oh, Snuggles. Shout out to Snuggles in the building.
Snuggles in the building. Snuggles in the building is saying, hey, that you come from royalty and you're lying. But well, if you don't mind reading what Snuggles is, he or she. I don't really know. I still don't know if it's a he or she. But they're addressing you.
All right, he says, lies, I tell you, Bernard came from royalty, and he tries to pretend to be one of the little people like the rest of us. Well, not like you, Ike. No. I'm definitely one of the little people. I've said plenty of times. I was one of those cogs in the machine, a blue-collar worker doing entry-level blue-collar work. So, no, I am one of the little guys. I did make decisions to put myself. I'm in position now on a track to not being one of the little guys. I'm on my way up now, but I definitely for most of my life was just, hey, give me some steel toe boots and tell me what time to show up, and I'm there with some tools and let's work. I was a blue collar worker most of my life, so yeah, so definitely one of the little guys. But shout out to Snuggle. Shout out to
Snuggle indeed. And Nicer says Bernard. I guess you know where that's from, right?
Oh wait, she says, "Wait, I want to read it so I can make sure I get the content."
It's on the screen. It just says,
"Oh,
Bernard."
Oh, okay. But no, yeah. I got it. I just wanted to see it. My monitor kind of far back. I couldn't exactly see that. But yeah. But in my mind, I didn't spell it like that. But I got it. Bernard.
Oh, shout out to all the other super chatters that are going by here. L Boy says, interesting meeting of the minds. Hi, Snuggles. And Orlando Johnson in the house. Well, thank you very much. So I like the answer that you gave. Okay, I had asked, okay, what is the point of going around taking these measurements? Okay, we understand there's a natural curiosity, right? Even a baby, you give them this pen, they're gonna start digging into it, right? Yeah. Like, what is this? What is that? So we can find just about anything, and then quantify it, and then put some theory around it in just about any kind of set of data. As I said, any distribution, whether it's a pile of leaves or a population of human beings. And I said, well, what is the point of looking at these collective outcomes? And again, we're talking about outcomes first. We'll get to actions later because actions are a little bit more elusive. What is even collective action, right? But we'll get there. We'll try to get there.
Difficult.
That is the hard part, right? So, but at least we can start from this outcomes part. And then you mentioned a couple of things that, yes, we do have. One of our values here is equality. We also have the freedom one, and then we have the nature one, my trifecta thing. But on the side of the equality thing, we like to look at disparities so that we can have some kind of intuition as to whether the disparity makes sense or not. More or less the first part? Yeah. Okay. Then you also mentioned the tribalism aspect, which I'm glad that, and we'll touch upon that a little bit later as well, because that's kind of one of the reasons why I believe in checking or challenging your psychological predispositions, because you could have all this kind of intrinsic motivation and individual, but you're still tribal, right? So, and I'm glad that you kind of just straight up admitted to that. And let me see this other super chat here from Kill Deuce, I believe. Shout out 499 says, Bernard Riley is the best morning show in the Black Manosphere. When will Sports Channel start? You gonna start a sports channel?
Yes, like I said before, and I have an actual time as to when it's going to start, and I'll explain that. But yes, I had before I started the channel I have now. I had a NBA channel where I talked about NBA basketball. It's lying dormant with like less than 500 subscribers, like 450 or 60 or something like that. I'm going to resurrect that channel and start using it. The reason it's not up, I was going to get it started, but I was waiting on a gift. My lady friend, to use Obsidian's term, for Christmas, she bought me a replica of an actual NBA trophy, the Larry O'Brien trophy. Like a real life-size replica of it. That's what she bought me for Christmas. And when I do my sports channel, that's going to be set up back here. I'm going to tweak the setup for my sports channel. So I was waiting on a few little trinkets to come through UPS. It just hasn't came yet because things take a long time to get here nowadays. So I'm waiting on waiting on that replica and a few more trinkets to arrive so I can have a separate setup for my sports channel. And when I get all that going, it will be starting. It is my first time formally announcing that in that way. So I kind of broke some news here.
You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Only here at the Ike Ogiyama channel, where I just, it's the name of the channel. We talk about being better and doing better. What are we doing today? We're talking to Bernard about individual and collective actions and outcome. We are both on the individual side of the ledger, psychologically speaking. But we're trying to challenge ourselves today, and we just started by acknowledging that, yes, we indeed use these outcomes, measurements of outcomes, and you gave a very nice description of it. And let me say something else, which is that some people suffer psychologically, okay? And we're talking about people that perhaps, let me not qualify them yet, but some people suffer psychologically from not feeling like part of the group. specifically not part of, like, if they are a minority, right? If they're less than 10% of the population, there are studies out there, and I take psychological studies with a grain of salt, but there are studies out there that say, some people are just they need therapy because they don't, the statement, I didn't see anyone else like me, right? Where do you, yeah, that hit you somewhere. Where did that hit you? What do you got to say about that thing about, and we know we're just talking about ourselves now, like how we are. How are you with that statement of needing to see people like you or not?
I'm very divided on that statement. There was a time in my life when I had more sympathy for that statement when people make that statement, but right now we live in such a liberal country that bends over backwards to be inclusive. When I watch a children's movie, I see androgynous characters, like deliberately androgynous characters, if not full blown gay characters. So when people say the thing, oh, I didn't see anybody like me, I'm just using the rainbow flag community as an example.
Gotcha.
That there's been plenty of examples, like even back in the 90s, I believe Will and Grace. I believe that was the 90s. That was a thing, but I can understand their gripe. That was only one. That was their little candle in the dark. But now it's all over, and you can't miss it. And it's like me and my woman, we just were recently talking about how many times it happens where we're just watching a regular show, and then out of the blue, like, whoa, wait, what? Hold on, wait, we didn't sign up for this. They didn't give us no warning that this character was into that. He just dropped down to his knees. Okay, all right, cool. I guess this logo is going down, huh? But so yeah, and then black people will make that claim, and when I look at the amount of black movies that are made, the amount of black TV shows, I don't think we can make that argument anymore. I think we're represented. I do. Now, how we're represented could be better, and I talked about this on my show recently. That representation, when you scratch beneath the surface, it's quite often black writers and black directors behind the scenes writing us this way that we complain about. So I can't say that with I think the rainbow flag community had an argument at one point, but I don't think they have an argument of I don't see anybody like myself. I don't think they have that argument anymore. If anybody has that argument, it would be Asians, but they really don't care. They just getting their money. They just making their money taking over tech in STEM. They don't care. But so I cringe whenever I hear somebody say that. I just recently saw that, and it was a movie. They Call Me Dolomite with Eddie Murphy, where he played the It was a movie. It was a movie called Dolomite in the 70s or 80s, where Eddie Murphy, they basically remade it or made a movie about the making of a movie or something weird like that. Eddie Murphy played the character, and one of the women in the character, she was a overweight black woman with an afro. And she, in that character, said she was thanking him, like she was saying, I don't see people like me in movies. But at that time, I understood where she was coming from. I mean, I wasn't around at that time, but looking back at it, I could see where she was coming from. I don't think you can make that argument, right? Oh, Dolomite is my name. There goes somebody got it right. Yeah, Dolomite is my name. Real good movie. I enjoyed it. It was funny. But I don't think people can make that case now. So to take it directly to what you said, how the minority cannot feel a part of the overall group. Black Americans, we got that bad. Like we have to explain to people on my channel all the time, like, we are Americans. You do know that this is our country. Like they talk about us as if we're something completely separate from this country. I have to remind people that yes, we helped build this country. We, our men fought and died in every war for this country. Every single war for this country, our men fought and died in it. We're citizens of this country. We pay taxes and fund the government of this country. I have to explain that to people because they look at the functioning of the country as they call it the white man, and any benefit we get from the country that our people help build, that we work in and pay taxes to fund the government, any benefit that we get from the government, they say that's the white man taking care of. That's taking care of you. That's the white man building your roads. I'm like, no, I put in on that too. So that speaks to the how bad we got it in this country. How we don't even view being a minority. We don't view ourselves as a part of the country or a part of the group, and that goes back to your previous question as to why we segment every little thing. The average debt to the average net to gross income. The how much this, how much that. We break all of that down into so many different pieces. Part of it was because we feel like we don't belong, and we're constantly just fighting for our piece of it. That's how so many black people feel. That's how so many black people think.
I see. Now, for me, you can already expect what I'm going to say when it comes to the whole. I think I'm even more extreme than you when it comes to especially the whole not seeing somebody like me aspect. I don't even understand what that even means.
Are you referring to you being albino?
No. We might say that as a particular reference, but I'm just saying psychologically speaking now, and I get that it's a psychological predisposition because this is not some kind of an argument to say, well, how do you argue if somebody says they need to see somebody that's like them? What's the argument, right? It's either you care or you don't. For me, I'm saying that I so don't care that I don't even begin to understand what they mean by that. Like I don't get it at all. Again, to the listeners out there, this is a psychological predisposition that I admit. This is not some kind of I am right. But I'm just saying that this is such a blind spot for me. You will never catch me even beginning to come close to saying something like I need some kind of representation of myself. It's such a foreign thing to me. Plus, as a matter of fact, I don't see anybody like me anywhere. You know, it's like, it's hard. I dare you. I dare you to go find them.
You can show anybody up in that I don't see anyone like me on the TV screen. But that comes from our whole little psychological. We make arguments like, hey, if they didn't see that growing up, they don't know that they could be that.
Bullshit. That's bullshit. The fact that I exist and people like me in terms of what I mean is psychologically, right? The fact that there's someone that can believe the way that I do exist just shows that that's pure BS. I never needed to see anybody. And I need to see somebody with a little whatever, or a little, like you were saying, you know, they have an ingrown hair on the left side of their cheek, and they were a doctor. If I don't see that person, then how can I know that ingrown hair people can be doctors too? It's like, come on. I was listening to MOT's panel the other day, and somebody was bringing this thing up too. And this is what I was talking about. When I came to your channel, I called it universal competence. And you need to understand that universal competence doesn't have a color or anything. It just has it's a mode of operation. And when you're there being university competent in this surgical room, doing your operation or whatever, you can't be looking around and be like, I'm the only black person here. It's like, no, it's just competence that matters at that point. And you guys are all operating within the same mode, and you guys recognize yourself at that level. Not at the level of skin color, but at the level of badassness or whatever it may happen to be, right? So I don't know if it seems like I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
Oh, no. You're good. The only thing I'll add to it, and this is what I said to somebody. We were talking about how women make bad mating choices. They'll get with the guy who had a marching band behind him, twirling red flags around when he showed up to her. It's like, you knew that guy was wrong. And then the counter argument was, well, the right type of guy, she never saw that growing up. She didn't see that in her father. She didn't. And with the way I responded to it, I was like, if I went my whole life without ever being kicked in the nuts, and I also went my whole life without ever being hugged, I wouldn't have to experience both of those to figure out which one feels good and which one probably hurts. So that's why I'm like, no, that argument is BS. That argument is BS.
I definitely resonate with you on that. Okay, so now, in your mind, do these collective outcomes affect us? So we're still on the side of outcomes, okay? Mm-hmm. We measure them, we go and we take them. You talked about the fact that it's because we are a democracy, and it's in that democracy part of things that the equality part comes from, right? The capitalism is not about the equality part. Capitalism is more about the freedom part. And then we have an aristocracy, such like or meritocracy, like in the Supreme Court side of things, and so on and so forth, right? But the democracy side of us wants always to go and look, hey, look what's going on over here. Are they equal over here? Are they equal over here? How about with hair length? How about with marrying out? How about with this kind of income? How about with that kind of education? That kind of a thing, right? But does it affect us? Okay, how do these things affect you, or how does it affect us? These particular outcomes, either directly or indirectly. We already touched upon some of it, but if you could just crystallize as to the fact that people do get affected by it, maybe or maybe not, right? These collective outcomes, and how does it affect us?
First, before I answer the question, give me 1 second. No. Okay. Just a little test I do to make sure that my mic, that I'm speaking right, and that the mic and that the microphone speakers. So I had to do that test real quick. I forgot to do it. Now, how does it affect us? Okay, I've been on record saying this is I don't care how bumpy the terrain is. It's on me to figure it out and figure out a way to strive and make something of myself. So when people talk about the collective group outcomes and how does it affect me, I like to, if I'm just talking about me, I like to say it doesn't affect me because I'm going to overcome whatever the obstacle is. Now, somebody can say that, okay, if you take 1,000 people and give them this particular start, that's not necessarily a good start. Roughly 300 of that 1,000 will still do good. Then you take another 1,000 and you give them this particular good start. Well, then maybe 500 to 600 of them will end up doing well. Somebody can actually make that argument, but then it turns into a situation. Is it those 1,000 people over here? Is it the job of those individuals to figure that out and equalize it for themselves, or is it somebody else's job, or is it the government's job? That's where we get into looking at the group and the collective outcomes, and we're not doing this as a collective and this as a group. But then I always say it goes back to cultural. There's some things that's culturally not being done in group A that are being done in group B, but it's up to the individuals to figure that out. So, and the individuals in that collective group, again, we're going back to that, the individuals in that collective group, they have to move in a certain way to increase the overall outcomes. But the catch is, when we're talking about capitalism, only a small percentage will end up doing really, really well, and everybody else will just end up with a job. So it turns into a situation where we start talking about the collective as if it's going to be, what's the best way I can explain this? I like to refer back to Black people on YouTube and the talking points we hear. They speak about like the wealth that white people have in this country. They like to talk as if it's evenly distributed amongst white people. That's how they talk. And I have to always explain that even if Black people who are 13% of the population own 13% of the wealth, you do realize only the top 10% of us will own 90% of that. Based per the way it looks for the rest of the country, where the top 10% owns 90% of the wealth in this country. So the collective outcomes that they think would make them actually do better, if they're not striving to win right now, even when we own the 13% of the wealth in this country, they would still be a cog in the machine. They would still be in the same position. So that's why I call it collective land, where they think that if we did A, B, and C as a collective, then overall we're just going to be doing so great. I try to refer them back to the Occupy Wall Street movement, which was called the 99% movement, where basically the white people who were not in the top 1% felt like they weren't getting a big enough piece of this American pie. So even if we did do everything that we needed to do and own 13% of the wealth in this country, we would end up having what I call the Occupy Black Wall Street movement, where we will be fighting to try to tear down the establishment black people who are lording over us and hoarding all the money. It's only gonna change for the driven individuals within that group, even if we did have better collective outcomes. I hope that explained it.
That explains it. And let me tease out something there, and that's the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I know, at least in this particular perspective, how you work, because I work that way too. And I would say that you and I are saying this based on our psychological predisposition. We don't necessarily feel like we're cogs in the wheel, or if we are, then it's our fault, right?
Exactly.
There are some people, perhaps, because we'll take a couple of steps back now to the fact that there are some people, like I said, some people will not feel like part of the larger group. They want to see, quote unquote, more people like themselves. Is it possible, and this is a question that maybe you don't, it's not a question for you to answer per se, but is it a valid question, right? That is the question. Is it a valid question to ask that perhaps what these people want is not to be up there? They just actually want to see more people like them. In other words, they just want more collective. They want the collective. They want to open that paper, see that number, and they just go back to their
yeah,
right. They just want to. That's all they want, right? Is it possible that that's what they want?
I think so. That actually makes sense. I never thought of it that way. They just want to look at the number and go, yeah, I never thought of it that way.
Oh yeah, my people are doing great, even though I haven't done nothing in the past 10 years. Well, black, we're doing great, right? So that is a possibility, right? And then, but on the and let me just mention something that I can't help in terms of that kind of statistical thing that people do, in terms of looking at populations and then talking about individuals. People do this. I don't know if there's a name for this fallacy, but jumping from population to individual, people do it a lot. So yeah. Mr. Murray or whatever in the trailer park over there. What does it mean to go tell him that he's more likely to be rich? You know how people use that more likely talk? Well, white people are more likely to be like, this guy has been broke all his life. All his family is broke. He lives in West Virginia in a trailer park. You're telling him he's more likely to be this, more or less likely. Oh, I'm more likely to be poor and in jail. Like, what does it mean to tell Ike that he's more likely to be in jail? Anyways, I just wanted to mention that part since you brought up the whole collective thing. But okay, now when it comes to perhaps an indirect way in which these numbers affect us, it'll be in the social fabric. What I mean by that is in perceptions. Is it possible, okay, that you don't get, you get no respect at all or whatever because of your membership in a particular group? People are looking down on you, or people not taking you as seriously to the point where it actually affects actual outcomes. Okay, because again, we're trying to map out, given the fact that we are not necessarily collective type people, we're trying to map out the contours of where the collective stuff actually is. Okay, what is the reality of it? Okay, so and I am asking you, what do you think about this reality of the perception of those numbers? We go and we chop up all those numbers, we print them all over the place. You can't stop people from dissecting populations and looking at different numbers. Those numbers will now cause certain perceptions, and that perception ends up affecting you. What do you think about that?
Now, that's a good argument. That's a good point. The perception actually does matter, or the ethnic reputation that matters. No matter how well behaved, well mannered, well groomed I am, if the perception of a 6'1" black man with darker skin is if it's a huge negative connotation towards it, then yes, some people are going to view me a certain way. Now, most of the time, I don't care. Let's just make that very clear. But you notice that, okay, this is just a stereotypical, the white woman clutching her purse on the elevator, when you get on the elevator with her. Yeah, the ethnic reputation and or perception has something to do with that. Now, that right there, you could say you don't care. An area where it's legitimate and black people should care is, for example, the criminal justice system. Now, I'm not caping for individuals who have broken crimes. They need to be let the law do its job, and whatever happens. But at the
MOT is going to come after you. I'm just kidding.
But at the same, he probably will agree with what I'm going to say here.
Okay.
At the same time, I will acknowledge that how they say that black men do a longer sentence for a similar crime, because some of the crimes there is for, I don't know, breaking and entry. If it's 2 to 5 years, if it's 2 to 5 years for breaking and entry, they say white men are more likely to do the lower end of that. Black men are more likely to do the higher end of that. Now, I don't know how much the discrepancy is or how big the disparity is, but you're talking about jury, 12 people. They have the perception and the ethnic reputation of black people in their mind. They're more likely to look at a 19 or 20-year-old white man who broke into somebody's house. They're more likely to look at that and say, "Oh, that was a kid. He made a mistake. He got off on the wrong foot on the wrong side of the track. He's doing he'll learn from this." And that, but the ethnic reputation, when they let's look at a black man who's 19 or 20, they're like, "No, that's a grown man. He knew exactly what he was doing. No questions asked." So the ethnic reputation thing, that actually matters, and we should be working to improve our ethnic reputation. But
Bernard, I'm just kidding.
No. But it doesn't. But see, here's the thing: it does not improve by just blaming white people for all the problems. It's taking an honest look at the things that black people are doing and saying, "Hey, that's wrong. That needs to stop, and that's in our hands." So it's taking personal responsibility for that reputation or for that perception. Now, me personally, as a law-abiding citizen, I'm not affected by that, but I can see how the perception is a problem. I can acknowledge the problem. Now, the simple solution is don't break in nobody's house. That's a very simple solution. Don't commit the crime. It's a very simple solution to that. But reputation and perception and all of that, it matters. But the reality is there are individuals amongst the group who I believe did a really good job to help us earn that negative reputation. So we have that negative reputation, and it is what it is, and improving the negative reputation and perception would actually matter. So I do give a little bit on the perception aspect of this, but it's still no excuse for the behaviors and the outcomes and what the individuals do. That perception does not make you do something you ought not be doing. That's where people go wrong. They try to say that perception. I remember Barack Obama said something similar. He said we need to teach our young girls that the images that they see of themselves on TV is not what defines them. That was the coded talk of saying that, see, they're just being brainwashed into acting in this way that they're acting. See, he's taking personal accountability out of their hands. Now, black women and black men, they all have their ethnic reputations, but it's individuals in the group that are earning those ethnic reputations. Those who do not engage in those activities need to speak loud and proud. We're against that. We're not with them. we don't condone that. But then we're race traitors, we're coons, we're this, we're that, and then so that goes back to what I said culturally. We culturally got some stuff cooked into our head to where we think it's even wrong to criticize negative behavior that gives us that perception and ethnic reputation that would ultimately cause somebody to not be lenient to the 19-year-old black kid who broke into somebody's house, whereas they would be more lenient to an Asian kid or a white kid who did the same thing.
I think that I like your thoughts on there. I think you covered it rather nicely. Okay, there's one thing that you mentioned. Were you looking? Oh, you were opening. I thought you were looking at your watch. I was like, I didn't ask you how much time you had or nothing.
Oh, I was about to ask you that, but then I forgot. I didn't know how long. I think you. I don't. How long do you want to go? Let me know.
I just let's keep going.
Let's just go. Let's just go. I'll start tapping out when I gotta go. If I gotta tap out, I will.
Yeah, definitely. So something that you mentioned, which is the not caring, okay, which is why I wanted to have a conversation with someone like you, because I'm like that kind of a person too, where it's like, okay, a reputation, fine. She clutched her purse in the elevator, but still I'm going to go up to the top floor and I'm going to close the deal and money's going to be in my bank account, right?
Exactly.
That kind of a thing, right? However, okay, because I think that we found one little spot here where we can kind of give credence to collective outcomes, which we say, yes, it does cause a perception, and that perception can affect, right, actual outcomes in individuals' lives, right? So, and you said, reputation matters. So I think that's one thing that we can kind of hold on to, because again, we are trying to go out here into this landscape to try to see what is valid for people like us over there. Now, for someone, we have a psychological disposition to, we're going to alpha our way through it and so on and so forth. But I think that when you get to a certain position, let's say you now have children, okay? And to the degree to which we believe, and you mentioned that you do believe in predisposition in terms of psychologically, that is, and that a lot of your positions or a lot of the way you perceive things is because of your psychological predisposition, okay? Now, how are you sure that your child, regardless of what you teach them, okay, they may fall on that other side where they're greatly affected by the reputation. And they may even be greatly affected by that whole minority thing, but there's nothing you can do about them not seeing people like themselves, or maybe there's something you can do about that, okay? But what are your thoughts, okay, on leaving a better world? People tend to say that one day, as I mentioned earlier, I say it's part of growing up to start looking at yourself as a collective. Tends to come for men with having children, that kind of a thing. And people start saying things like, living a better world, where the relevant collective outcomes, the relevant measures of collective outcomes are improved, such that that child of yours, regardless of whether they're of a particular psychological type or not, will not be affected by it. Now, we haven't gotten into how you're going to do that yet, because the action part, that's the harder part. Right now, we're just still looking at the outcomes, okay? You have this particular psychological predisposition. How are you sure your child is going to have that psychological disposition? Is it not incumbent upon you to try to do whatever you can to make sure that they don't have to suffer the effects of a certain kind of quote-unquote ethnic reputation?
It's certainly on the parent to make sure of that. Certainly on the parent to make sure of that. And it's funny you say that, because I'm kind of dealing with that with my kids. Because, a lot of people know my story. I got married really young, and when I married, she had a child. We got divorced when the child was probably about 14, but I still have a relationship with him. And he, much like his mom, blames a lot of stuff on racism. He acts, he's liable, like his mom, to get in an argument at a cell phone store because of some disagreement or dispute. I mean, he's 19. No, he just turned, God damn, time flies. He just turned 20. He's liable to just much like his mom, to get into an argument at a cell phone store over dispute or misunderstanding of what was supposed to be said in the contract and how much this or how much, and it turns into it becomes about race. And I'm like, no, maybe you misunderstood what was said, or maybe he misunderstood you. Why are you blaming? So he has that whole the racial chip on his shoulder. Now my oldest biological son, he can care less. He don't walk around with no chip on his shoulder. He don't think like that. He don't act like that.
You see, that's perfect. I'm just interjecting here slightly, because you have, in the case you see that this psychological predisposition thing, right? Where one, it's not like you have to tell that one anything. They just do it that way. And then this one, it's not because you told them something opposite. They're this way, right? So if you project that forward, right? Let's say we take it out of your particular genetic concerns, right? And you say, okay, maybe for your grandchildren, maybe you're still genetically concerned, or maybe you kind of push it out into the future. You're long dead and gone. Do you feel the need for those whom will be psychologically predisposed to be affected by this kind of reputation thing? Do you feel it incumbent upon you to take certain kinds of action to change the reputation that is out there, beyond just for you and the fact that you're going to do what is right anyways and you're going to be an example? Do you feel like, we have to, do you feel the need to take it into collective land, as you say, to try to do something in the collective land to change that collective image?
It's odd you say that, because I'm kind of doing it now. When you look at the YouTube channel, someone pointed out that my channel does show a positive representation of black men. People point out that a lot of people disagree with what Kevin Samuels is doing is positive, but he is representing black men well. Some not going to get into that about the people who would disagree, but he is being a good public representative, so to speak. And yeah, public representatives, you would think, would change the overall perception. The story that I like, one of my favorite people on earth is Neil deGrasse Tyson. It was formerly Carl Sagan. Neil deGrasse Tyson was his mentor. But Neil deGrasse Tyson said when he was in college, he said the people who were, in the movement, the black movement back then, I'm thinking this was probably 80s for Neil deGrasse Tyson. They told him, you are so smart, all of your brilliance, you don't need to waste it on talking about astrophysics. You don't need to waste it on that. We need all that intellect in our movement. We need that. And what Neil deGrasse Tyson said, he pointed out something very brilliant. He said that he was the first black person who was ever brought on TV as an expert on something. And it didn't have anything to do with being black. His race wasn't mentioned. He wasn't an expert. He wasn't coming in as the black expert on blackness or how this thing affects the black community, because there was something back in the 80s where an asteroid or something was gonna pass over the Earth, but it was gonna pass really close, and people were worried that the asteroid was going to hit the Earth, and so it was like kind of a little hysteria. We're all gonna die. Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson, he was in college, and he was a college student, and he, okay, where's this asteroid? He figured out where the asteroid was at, found out the size of the asteroid, how fast it's moving, where's the Earth at, where the Earth's orbit, and where the Earth was going to be at when the asteroid passed by. He ran, did the calculations, ran the numbers. He said, oh no, all that's going to happen is going to pass over our head. We're going to be able to see it. It's going to get kind of close. We're going to be able to see it. It's going to be some debris that's going to fall in the desert, but the asteroid, the part that will actually destroy Earth, is going to miss us by X number of miles. So we're good. We're good. And when he explained that, they were like, oh wait, we need you to come on TV. He was a college student. They had him come on TV and explain that. So there he is as a black man, like a 23-year-old black man on TV, explaining to the masses that, no, we're not going to die. Everything's okay. I did the math. Don't worry. Go back to sleep. He said that's just as valuable, if not more valuable, than the people with their fist in the air marching for, he said him showing that, him showcasing that, him presenting that, it was more valuable. Now, he said that the way he figured out that it hadn't happened Well, he didn't know for sure if it hadn't happened before him, but he was paying attention after it happened for him. It was probably he said it was 8 years later before he saw on TV another black man who was speaking as an expert on a subject that had nothing to do with being black. And so things like that are valuable to the overall reputation. So when you ask me or anybody who's putting any content, anything out into the universe, so to speak, yeah, they're doing their part to affect the overall ethnic reputation for better or worse. So,
but I like how you brought in the worst.
Oh yeah. Some people, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like my show is always a good representation. I try to be a good representation. Sometimes when I open up the panel, not so much. But we can all try. We can all try for better or worse. We are affecting the overall ethnic reputation. But I like what you said about whether or not, because I do believe some people are genetically hardwired or have a certain tendency to operate in a certain way. And I spoke on my stepson, how he has a tendency to act a certain way. I think you can correct the course to some degree for your offspring and your group and those individuals who you can affect in touch. I think you can affect those outcomes, but I do believe it's the case that some people are just hardwired to lean in a certain direction. Maybe you can pull them to the middle. You know, that's where I'm at with that.
100%. Thank you very much. Is that Tanqueray? You know, I assume it's Tanqueray. Yeah, 10 gin and tonic. Said Bernard, do you think that black men who are in relationships with white women give more to black community than blacks married or single? Do you understand what he's trying to ask you, sir?
I believe he's asking me, do black people who are in relationships with the white community give more to the black community than black people who are married to black people or black people who are single? Well, seeing as there are, if you're talking about the overall group, there are more black people that are married to black people than what there are black people married to white people, and there are more black people that are single than there are black people married to white people. So overall, black people who are either single or married to black people are given more. If you break it down to the individuals, that's something we would need to see data on. If the average black person, let's just say black man, the average black man who's married to a white woman does more for the black community than the average black man who's married to a black woman, that would be some really interesting data. I would love to see that, but I don't know about that. I think he said, I heard this stat the other day. I don't know about that, but there have been some popular or famous cases, like we know Robert Smith, who's married to a white woman who paid off the tuition to the to black students at I forgot which historically black college, but we know the story with that one. That I did a story, and then O'Shea did a follow-up video on it on Drew Holiday, an NBA player who donated the remainder of his salary to black businesses and organizations. It came up to about $5 million. He's married to a white woman. So there's that. There are some success. Damon John, I believe he donates. He's the creator of Fubu. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think he does do a lot to help black people. Maybe not all. Well, I've seen him do some things. I don't know how much.
Is he married to a white woman?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I mean, there's some famous examples of rich black men who are married to white women who give a lot and donate a lot. So there's that. But as far as an actual stat or something to prove it, and I tend to believe that even if it did come out to be more, I think it would probably be coincidence. I wouldn't put any stock in the skin color of your woman has something to do with rather what you feel like you're going to do to your people, do for your people. If anything, it may negatively affect it, but I tend to believe it probably will be neutral if they did pull out some stats on that. That's just my my guess.
Gotcha. Yeah, I like the answer to the previous thing about your child and then pushing it into the future, and you talking about your YouTube channel and bringing the Neil deGrasse Tyson example. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, again, okay, we're talking about individual versus collective action and outcomes. Okay, I'm the kind of person, if you listen to my channel or you may be new, let me announce right now. If you are new, you should be smashing that subscribe button. You should be smashing the like button. You should be sharing the screen, And when you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the bell button and the all. And don't listen to Snuggles earlier that said that, Ike is rich and don't give him super chats. No. 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 I want the super chat. I want the Cash App. As a matter of fact, moderators, you should be dropping that Cash App periodically, okay? And you should be super chatting as much as possible in heavy doses, all right? Because that's how we keep things circulating and flowing. We need to understand, okay? Anyways, I'm not going to get into some capitalist rant right now, but
Yeah.
let me come back. Basically, we're talking about individual versus collective, okay? I'm intrinsically motivated. I believe, okay, I'm going to take actions independent of external circumstances, independent of external outcomes. I'm definitely going to be pushing myself and thinking that my individual discipline is what, or has some correlation, perhaps a causal relationship as well, to my outcomes. Bernard is also that way. But what we're doing today is we're challenging ourselves. We're trying to find out what the contours are of the collective land of outcomes and efforts. Okay, what does collective action look like? We haven't gone to the action part yet. We've been looking at outcomes. We've talked about the studies, the data. Why do we go and slicing and dicing people into groups and measuring all kinds of parameters? Okay, what is the usefulness of that? We talked about psychologically why we just can't help but do it, but also because of democracy and equality, we want to check if things are equal. And if they are not equal, is it unequal in an intuitive way, in a way that we can explain? Or do we have to agitate for equality in that particular regard, and so on and so on and so on. And yes, you're damn right, Snuggles. You need to pay for that comment that you made earlier, talking about that people not to super chat. That's very bad. I need to take your wrench away. You know what?
Oh damn! I can hear snatching wrenches.
Oh, thank you very much, Snuggles, for another $5 super chat. You said, I never said don't give him super chat. I said he is rich, but we should still give him super chat so that it looks colorful. Yes, exactly. You want to add to the show, okay? It's better when people are super chatting. It looks nicer on the screen when people are super chatting, and it shows definitely that this is making sense to you. And when I feedback loop, the evolution depends on feedback loop, okay? And thank you again, Tangeray 10 Gin and Tonic. It says Ike is rich. He be dropping $500. Okay. Ike and Bernard should collab with Black Heights.
Are you aware?
I see.
Is?
Yeah, and so and that whole point. Yeah. Tangeray made a good point there about the $500 because I could be saying, hey, KS is rich, right? I could be saying he doesn't need money, but hey. We know what this is about. Oh, Dr. Thunder. Wow, the super chats are coming in. This is working, man. Thank you, Bernard. Some loose pocket change for Ike, a rich guy fund. Leading by example. Well, thank you very much. So now, okay, we're about kind of coming to the part where we're going to go into the action part, and the action part is the harder part, okay? Because it's like, okay, it's even hard enough to know how to motivate yourself, how to push yourself, how to act as an individual. Not to talk about collective action. It's like, where's the collective arm and the collective leg? Where's the collective brain? Where's the collective stomach that gets motivated, that gets hungry, right? How do you do that? But we're smart people. We know that the collective land does matter, and there are people who pull levers on the collective level. Right? There are people out there playing collective chess, right? Now, what do you think about that? We're not going to get into the action yet, but what I just said, do you at least accept that there is, or there are people whom pull collective levers? And when I say people, I mean maybe institutions and systems that do that.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to when you're talking about doing things as a collective. There are going to be people at the bottom who are going to be subordinate to those at the top. And what I believe, my personal belief, is those individuals who are at the top of this collective network even if everybody was very individualistic in a capitalist in a capitalist situation, it would definitely still end up being those same individuals who probably would rise to the top and still have some type of control or some type of pulling of the levers. The business owner, we talked about the top 10% that owns 90% or the top 1% that owns 50%. Those people, in that sense, you can say to some degree they are ruling over everyone else, or you could say that the government to some degree is ruling over everyone else. Well, they govern with under the consent. I mean, we give them our vote, we elect them, we give them consent to govern over us. That's how it's supposed to go. And if we're talking about democracy, that's how it's supposed to go. But if we're talking about collectivism, there's still individuals who are running the show. So people still end up being cogs in the machine, but they're cogs in the machine with less individual freedom and ability to rise up to that top. So that's where it gets tricky if you try to stay strict to collectivism.
And we'll get there. We'll get there in a granular fashion. Now, let me mention something here, because you talked about family, you gave example with members of your family, and family kind of came to mind. And I want to mention two things here. I was just like a couple of things to note. That first of all, and to give credit to groups, right? It is always true, even as individuals, we know that a team will always beat the individual, right? Like it's one of those sayings, right? It's trivial, and I think I think it's true. We don't really need to think too much about it, okay? But even when you talk about families, okay, and I think it's a salient point, because people talk about individual, and then when they get a family, they say, okay, but my family is doing well. My kids go to college. My family owns this business or whatever, or these group of dry cleaners over here in Milwaukee, whatever it may be. But is it not the case that families need a superstructure, or maybe an undergirding, whatever the hell kind of picture you want to paint, something that supports family itself, right? In other words, if as an individual you are just this island onto yourself, you know that you can't really sustain over the long term. So if you're just, my one individual family here amongst the group of, let's say, an ethnic group, and my family is doing well, but is it not the case that the family needs a structure that supports quote unquote family? And some people call it, let's say, a culture that supports family or something like that, or institutions that support family, aunts and uncles that talk nicely about family, whatever the hell it may be, right? And to put it in practical terms, is it not the case that you need another family to intermarry into, just in practical terms, right? If you're the only family in Milwaukee doing great,
right,
and it's time for your daughter to get married and no one else is doing great, how long is this dynasty gonna last, right? And if we look at other groups, right, that maybe are insular or do play this collective game, and have certain structures in place, it is the case that they do pass the football around, right? You intermarry. I gotta sell my business, okay, because I've come into some hard times, and I sell it to your family, but I keep it within the overall group. It's still a Nigerian business or a Jewish business or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
So is it not? So what are your thoughts on that? In terms of a superstructure that supports family, regardless of whether you're like, I'm good and my family is good, but you're the only family around, and how long can that last, right? It's not the case that intermarrying needs to happen. Passing of the financial football needs to happen. What are your thoughts?
Well, it was two things there. When you talk about the family in Wisconsin that's doing well, it needs to be at least one other family that's doing well, so there can be some collaborations. But what that will ultimately amount to, it sounds like the cream that rises to the top needs to get with other cream that's rising to the top. So that's one aspect of that. You said something else that was good when you talk about culture or the structure or institutions.
Yeah. So the structure that supports more of those cream, so that you have more other families to choose from. But go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I said earlier about it being cultural. Yeah, you do need that. You do need a culture that supports family. I talk about all the time how the outcomes of Black people that were born into actual families are just as good as white people in this country. And there we go back parsing out how good white people are doing versus Black people versus Mexican people versus these individuals or that individual or this immigrant or that immigrant. But yeah, you do need a culture that supports it, and that's where one area where I get, in this space where a lot of people are anti-marriage. Well, not everybody, but there's enough to notice. There's enough to notice. Enough people are anti-marriage where I say I have to point out, regardless of how many people don't like it, that outcomes are better for individuals that are born into structured families, and the only way that I know to measure that is looking at marriages. Those individuals have better outcomes. And when those individuals have better outcomes, that speaks to the framework of the cultural structure that you're talking about that will produce more people that will rise to the top. So that's a factor in the equation. But institutions that promote it, I don't know how you do that. Policies that promote it, I don't know how you do that. The people gotta want it. It has to be in the culture. Culture happens at the grassroots. And what
I will say this. I will just interject, and we haven't transitioned into that action part yet. But one thing to just notice is that there are people and institutions or groups out there that actually are doing it actively, consciously.
All right, explain.
Like they actually, like certain. Let's just say, take some ethnic group, or we could just take people whom use certain religious institutions, like the mosque, for example, to make sure that worthy women go to eligible men whom are vetted, and there's a hierarchy structure, and no one is just going to come around here and so on and so forth, right? So
you're speaking that foreign language, because that sounds, when you start talking about what's the arranged marriages. You start talking about
some level of arrangement. There's something's got to be arranged, otherwise it's pure chaos, right? So there's always some level of arrangement. Right?
I know, but I like to looking at things from an American cultural perspective. That we had a generation of women burning bras in the streets to get away from what you're talking about there. You're talking about women being.
And where's that gotten us, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're talking about a system that I mean, look, I support it. Of the women ultimately being protected, their sexuality being protected, they're being presented to the most worthy, productive, competent men are getting beautiful virgin wives, and those are actual functioning institutions that promote families and outcomes. In America, oh my goodness, we're light years away from that. You hear it on Kevin Samuels, where he will be talking to a woman who's allegedly a virgin. Let's just take her word for now. She's a virgin, she's religious, she's a Christian, and then he will just basically say, okay, so you're almost 30, you're still a virgin, and it's because of your faith and your religion and you're this and you're that, or they could be over 30. He'll be like, you need an arranged marriage. You need somebody. Where are the men who are guiding you, who are vetting men and putting you in front of worthy men? And he might as well have held up a mirror to a vampire. She's like, arranged marriage? You mean? But what if I don't like them? What if I don't find them attractive? Or what if I don't vibe with them? Or what if this and what if that? So it's when you talk about that type of structure and institution and all of that, and that goes back to that's right in line with the collective. Now those are people moving as a collective. But remember what I said? They have to be subordinate to the group and the overall better outcomes for the group, which means that woman, she don't got no say in that guy, that worthy guy that was put in front of her. She got to be subordinate to the collective. So when they're saying we don't move as a collective,
she can just be merely subordinate to her nature, in the sense that she does want the not, we may go into the dual nature, whatever, but at least there's one aspect of the nature that does want the bag, right? And yes, so it's not a completely outside her interests for her to go with the son of the senator who's been kind of, and he's a respectable guy, and he's gone through his rites of passage and so on and so forth, right?
Yeah. I mean, no.
I just wanted to mention this just because you said, how would one even do that? And it kind of goes to your point of Americans are so far off that they don't even understand that people actually are doing this this very second.
I mean, I understand that there are countries and cultures that actually do that, but I've long came to the conclusion that we're going to have to do a de facto version of what white Americans are doing, or at best what Asian Americans are doing, where their people get together, they have a really high marital rate, but they have freedom. It's sort of like the Matrix. Right now, you're like the architect. I don't know how familiar you are with the Matrix, but in the Matrix Reloaded, the architect said his flaw, the reason he couldn't get the Matrix to work, is because of choice. And he said a lesser program stumbled across that. That was the Oracle. The Oracle figured out that it will work, but people have to choose it. Each individual has to choose to be in the Matrix. So with Asian people, with their high marital rate, they're choosing it. Nobody's forcing them to do it. They choose to get married at a high rate. White people used to choose to get married at a really high rate. It was choice. So it has to be 100% freedom, and the individuals have to come to the conclusion that yes, marrying this person, getting with this person, that's most ideal for raising a family. That is the free choice that I have made, and I want to do that, and I want to stick it out and tough it out through thick and thin for the overall better outcomes of children. Free people in a free country has to make the free choice. So if you in the slightest bit with Americans take choice out of the equation, they lose their minds. Everything goes haywire and the Matrix crashes. That's what happened. That's what happened when it goes back to the burning those bras in the street. That was the Matrix. They didn't accept the programming.
I like the way you put it there. Okay, and I just wanted to kind of show that it is done and it is possible, no matter how far flung it may seem. Because over here we're trying to give credence to collective land, right? We're trying to look at it left to our devices. We're just gonna keep on grinding. We're just gonna keep on pulling ourselves by our bootstraps. We're gonna be like, okay, I'm good. My family is good, right? I'm whatever it may be. And what are you talking about, this collective outcomes and so on and so forth. So, but I like the way you put it in the sense that choice is key in the American context. But I do believe, as the architect, I got to go back to the drawing board, right? But I do believe there are many ways of making people feel like, I do sales, right? And the best way to sell to somebody is to make them think that it was their choice. You simply coax them emotionally. You don't coax them with logic or reason. It's an emotional thing where you align it with their natural. That's why I mentioned one particular nature aspect, which was like, there is an aspect of her nature that wants the bag, right? So you find men that want the bag, but that have the bag, but have also been vetted in other ways. These are legitimate men. They are from good stock. They are honest, right? They didn't steal the money and so on and so forth, and they will be held accountable, right, for not effing it up. Right? That kind of a thing. So that is just a very, very low resolution example of how you can make it in people's interest, right, to go in directions that are also good for the collective. Now I sound like a total collective type guy, but but very good. And I wanted to give a point of caution here about outcomes, and then we'll go into the action aspect. Okay. The thing about outcomes is this. Okay, we started out this conversation talking about, well, we have this population of human beings. We start dissecting them into different subgroups: men, women, black, white, ethnic, black, short, tall, and then we take all kinds of parameters, socioeconomical data, and you can come up with all kinds of data, right? And then we start measuring, right? And that is fine, but let me tell you what is dangerous. What's dangerous is comparing. Okay, now it's like, well, what do you comparing is the whole point, right? That's what somebody might say. But let's take it back to individual land, right? A land that you and I understand. In individual land, it is said, and it is true, that you don't compare yourself with someone else. They have these silly little memes about don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 15. I'm sure you've seen that one. Those kinds of things, right? So, and it is a good admonishment that we ought to compare ourselves with whom we were yesterday, not someone else. Look, the reason being, number one, why it's dangerous is because the standard of measure is arbitrary. So let's stay with the individual, right? If we compare ourselves with Bill Gates, then we're all, or maybe Bill Gates is, pick your billionaire that's also cool and the one you would want to be, because maybe you don't want to be Bill Gates. You don't want to be like, you don't want to wear those sweaters, right?
or the mom jeans, or no, I don't want to wear the mom jeans.
So for me, maybe it would be like Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is the first investor in Facebook. He's smart, but he's also cool, and he kind of, okay, Peter Thiel would be my guy. So pick your billionaire that has attributes that you can vibe with. You compare yourself with him, you're an abject failure. If you want to go with this whole kind of psychological mindset, a particular kind of psychological mindset, then you should be demoralized completely. So my point here is that standard of measurement is arbitrary. You arbitrarily picked Bill Gates or Peter Thiel. You compared yourself with him. What are you going to do? That's number one, the arbitrariness. And then number two is the fact that it is perhaps impossible for parity to actually happen. So similar to Bill Gates, for example, it may just be impossible just because of the nature of the economy that you're not going to get more money than Bill Gates, no matter how hard you try, right? Let me take some other example that is clear. Now in collective land, let's say you take Asian Americans. Asian Americans look around and they say, hey, those Kenyans, they keep winning marathons, all right? We need to win as many marathons as the Kenyans. I'll put big money on the fact that it'll never happen. Okay?
Yeah, I'm with you.
It'll never happen. And is that now a problem? Should they now be agitating in the streets? Should they be whipping their backs like, oh my God, how come we cannot, win as many marathons as the Kenyans and so on and so forth? Point being, go ahead, measure, okay? Go ahead, compare. But compare these groups with where they were before, right? So when you're saying men this or women that, compared to the same group, same men in the past. Because when you pick an arbitrary standard, let's say now you're going to, for some reason, everybody wants to compare with the white population, for example, right? It's similar to just picking, like, I'm going to compare with Bill Gates, or it's arbitrary. It is arbitrary, unless you're saying that there was some God-given doctrine, something came down from Mount Olympus that told us the standard, right? So you arbitrarily pick, and then number two, because of a set of circumstances, and I give a physical example. I like that physical example, and I know that I use it. I used it in when we had a conversation about the Kenyans and running, because people can get that one, right? So a set of circumstances that make it such that you will never be winning marathons like the Kenyans do. So it may also be the case because of a whole other set of circumstances that you may never catch up to whatever group you're trying to arbitrarily compare yourself with. So this is just me coming now from my strong individual place again to kind of assert a warning, right? That go ahead, measure all you want. In fact, even compare if you want, but understand that there is a danger of being arbitrary. Well, what do you have to say about that, what I just said?
Whoa, you said a mouthful.
My bad.
Just to speak to the last thing that you said, and you kind of alluded to this at the beginning. Okay, if we're trying to take for example white people as the arbitrary benchmark or measuring stick, and we're saying that if our group does not measure up to that. What ends up happening, and we do this all the time, an individual will get criticized when the group doesn't measure up to another group, regardless of how good that individual is doing. Like that's the goofy thing that we do. I have to argue people down from that ledge all the time. So that ends up being a situation where it's almost like the smaller group, the minority group, the group that's not doing as well as the larger group, that you could talk about the starting point or this or that, or why they're doing better, or for whatever reason, the group that's not doing as well, they always, even if you're a high performing individual in that group, you're always going to have to carry that cross, bear that burden. You know, we've heard the phrases, there's no such thing as a high value black man, because a collective group of black men are
we're conquered, didn't you know?
Y and Z. Okay, yeah. So that's what that comes down to. So we end up whenever we try to go to collective land, the arguments get kind of silly. But there is something to be said about looking at where we were at 10 years ago. Where are we at now? Looking at where we at 20 years ago, where are we at now? Let's look at where we could feasibly project ourselves to be 10 years later. And yeah, that actually makes sense. That actually makes sense. That's a good way to go about it. That's a good way to measure. Are we moving the needle forward? That's probably the best way to look at it if we're going to do the whole collective thing. If we're going to talk about that, if we're going to do that, if we're going to do collectivism correctly, we need to get a clear, precise picture of where it is, and then 5 years later, let's look at it. Let's look and see how far did the needle move. That's exactly the way to do collective land if you're going to do it.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And it's very backwards, because in the individual case where you actually have more agency, right, you can actually do more things to move the needle in your life, right? In that individual case where we know, oh, of course I'm comparing myself with my past, right? But when it comes to collective land, where you actually don't have as much agency, right, all of a sudden we compare with everybody else. It's you know, but
I love how you put that. When it gets in a place, and when we're talking about the collective, you don't have agency over the collective. So, but we're expected to bear the brunt or the responsibility of the collective not being somewhere.
People are crazy like that, and there are psychological reasons for that. Now, okay, so let's move from outcomes, right, into action. Okay, now this is the more this is the crazier side. Okay, and I can say, because I was here taking notes, I can say that while we were talking about outcomes, a couple of things came up which I think we're kind of solid about. Like, okay, us as individual type guys, individualists, whatever, we can say two things at least. We can say, number one, perception, right? In terms of a ethnic reputation or perception does affect, right, me, right? Therefore, that is a feature of collective outcomes that I can be, or that I should be, that I should pay attention to, okay? And that it is real. And the other one is families, and that families do need that kind of a structure, and families are important. You know, you need other families in Milwaukee, otherwise you're going to be done. Your family name is going to be gone in 100 years, doesn't really matter, right? So if we now move into the area of outcomes, okay? So we know that individual discipline creates individual outcomes. At least there's a causation. Maybe it's just a correlation, right? We have agency. The notion of collective land tends to be cringy to me. It feels very tribal, but I know that I need to challenge my cringe, right? Because I know my cringe is about psychological predispositions, and I can't just be going based on emotions or instincts. Those instincts help me survive as an individual. That's my style. That's how I roll. But as I said, what got me this far may not necessarily get me to the next step, right? So I'm going to take what I have and I'm going to look over the fence, which is what we're doing. We're looking over the fence to collective land and seeing what we can learn from that, okay? So what are your initial impressions, okay? Free for all. When it comes to the possible modalities of collective discipline, right? Collective action, a collective shepherding. And Sorry if I'm getting too heady, and I didn't
go ahead.
make me for this to be a dissertation, a sociological dissertation or whatever. But sometimes I can't help it, right? But
Like it.
possibilities, modalities of this instilling this and instantiating this collective discipline, and also the collective shepherding of a group to hitting a target, right? Like, if you were, could you picture some kind of grandmaster chess strategy of how this happens? Or what are just the impressions on you when I just say that, for example?
Okay, it can happen in a couple ways, and most of the individuals in the group will not like the way that I think it can happen. Well, the first way that it can happen, and people shouldn't have a problem with this. It would have to happen in a lot of different pockets on a small scale. We talk about families. If groups, small groups, got together and did something. For example, I've already to some degree I've done something similar to what I'm describing. You find an individual that you can work with. This individual has a connection with this. You could buy products wholesale from this person. Now you've bought those products wholesale. Now you're selling those products, and now you've made a profit from those products, and now you've taken that profit and you've went to somebody else and you've done something else with that money. You see how you got groups and individuals within the group that you're working with. Now you have your individual goals, they have their individual goals, but you are all working together in some type of way. Now that's small groups. Now it can extrapolate forward, and it could get bigger. In this business that this individual who I'm buying wholesale products from, they could ultimately end up stocking my store. So now I'm buying from this person. So I'm giving money to this person, helping them, this person of the same race, and now I'm using it. I'm providing goods and services to other individuals of our race. Now I have to hire people, and then now I'm hiring people of the same race within the same group, and then now they're working for me, and they're using money that they're making working for me to take care of their families. So that's just basic 101 how being collective can work. But it's all going to go back to the individuals. My individual actions and my need to make money through business is what drove it. That happened to cause me to hire 10 people and provide an income for them. And by the way, I'm not there yet where I'm got 10 people working for me, but fleshing it all out, it could very well possibly be the case someday that I got 10 or 20 people working for me, that my money that they're getting working for me is what taking care of their families. And so that's one way how it could actually work. That's small scale. And so that's what happens in small pockets, where other people, a lot of times Black people, will look at other groups and say, yeah, they're working as a large scale collective. No, what you saw was small groups, one driven individual who probably worked with another driven individual, and they ended up putting something together and building something and ended up providing a few jobs, and that was that. Now at the large scale, there's the Sam Walton example that I always use. He's hired probably millions of people, but that's one individual, completely driven, started out with one little store, and now he owns thousands of stores nationwide and is hiring hundreds of millions. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people globally, I should say. So as far as groups working as a collective, and this is why I said people won't like it, because they would just end up being employees or cogs in somebody else's very large machine, like a Walmart effect. So if there was a Black person who decided that he was going to build some type of Walmart equivalent, some type of factory that produces something, and hire his people, and yes, he's providing jobs and income that's taking care of families, and that is good collective work, and it's working. But at the end of the day, most of the people involved in that would just be cogs in the machine making $20 an hour, which is the same thing that they're making right now. Only difference is the person at the top of that machine does not have the same skin color as them. So that's why I feel like even if it happened in this collective, you talk about black people, black economics, or black people controlling the dollar in their community. If it happened like that, it still would be just certain individuals really profiting and benefiting from it, and everybody else just profiting a job. So when you move to that space where you're talking about actual actions, what will be required of most people, that's why I said they're not going to like it, what will be required of most people is labor. Most people would just have to be labor for the overall collective dream. And if they're just labor for the collective dream, they're still going to walk away with the same feeling like they're a slave to it.
Maybe not, because remember what we discovered earlier is that there are people whom perhaps just want to see these numbers, or want to see that organization, that it reflects them, and they don't care if they're just a cog in the wheel, as long as it's a black wheel or a brown or a male, whatever it is, group, tribal kind of wheel, they feel happy, right?
I would hope that would be the case. I honestly do. I honestly hope that would indeed be the case, that if black people built it and owned it, and then and then the individual black people who were the cogs in the machine making the same $20 an hour that they were already making working for some big company owned by some white man off in Florida with his feet up somewhere. If that man was black and they felt better by that, and they felt like, hey, we own a piece of this is ours, and we're not just working on an assembly line I called it, when I was doing blue collar work, I said that we were biological construction equipment. That's what I called it. And maybe they won't have that feeling, or maybe they will feel like there's a higher cause that they're working for, and they will have that that release of everything being good for their people. Maybe
we know at least there is a cohort, a percentage. We don't know how large it is. It's 10. If it's 10, I think it's good enough, because those 10 are a great army for the pushing forward of this particular thing. Those are the great pawns, if you will, right? for playing this chess game that we're trying to play here. Thank you, Bernard, for the $20 super chat. I noticed that one. Thank you very much. Yeah. K Coaching, thank you for the super chat as well. He says, shout out to the brothers. K Coaching, you guys go ahead and subscribe to K Coaching's channel. I watched the interview with him and another coach, I believe he's called Coach K, or yesterday. So that was a good interview. And who else do we have over here? We have another super chat that I saw. This is that Alton? Alton Prayer says, great show, Bernard, and shout out to Ike for turning me on to the importance of meditation. Definitely. Yes, we're all about mastery of subjective consciousness here. So you mentioned a few things, okay? You mentioned what is a microcosm, right? Somebody talked while you were talking, somebody asked about nepotism, right? Nepotism is just natural, just like tribalism. Look, it's a genetic thing. Like, it's not even to be questioned per se. It's just a question of whether or not you are doing good work. Right. So when I call my buddy that graduated with me from Cal Poly Pomona in engineering so that I can give him this opportunity, right? And this is not even a genetic thing now, right? It's just, the question really is not, well, why am I giving it to my buddy? The question is my buddy going to do good work or not, right? Because people are going to do business with people whom they know, like, and trust, right? And then when it comes to family, there's not even any question. It's like, of course, people are going to be doing nepotism. Of course, people are tribal, right? It's just, you can't change the nature aspect of that, right? Then it's just a question of, are you guys actually good, right? Are you actually good at what you do? Now, the microcosm part of what you were saying, because it's almost like you can describe, and I know I'm calling microcosm, right? You can even describe, quote unquote, the manosphere, the black manosphere, to be this kind of a thing where it's like, okay, someone started something and then, started doing something, and then some kind of a clump came around it, an algorithm found it, and then people try to then use that algorithm, whatever, benefit each other, so on and so forth. There's the same $20 super chat that's circulating around. I give you $20, you give O'Shea $20, O'Shea takes the $20, gives it to them, and that same $20 does a lot of good, if you will. It kind of circulates around, that kind of a thing, right? So basically, you described a microcosm kind of a scenario, but I think that macrocosm, right? If you can do it on a small scale, it is doable on a large scale. But let me go ahead and let me see here. Snuggles again. He's like the king of $5 super chats.
Right.
We appreciate it, Snuggles. It said Bernard $20. That's it. Stop being cheap. We know you got more.
I got to get on your level, Snuggles, and send like $5 super chats per stream. That's what I got to do.
You got to split it up. I'm
trying to get on your level, Snuggles.
There is something that you mentioned about people seeing, or you said, let's say it's one group looking at other groups and saying that they're operating in as a collective. And then you point out the truth that they are operating as individual units. Mm-hmm. However, the truth also is there is that superstructure that allows them to have, let's say we take the case of families, more of those families to be playing that game with, right? And they did not just go ahead.
What is the superstructure that allows the family
culture?
Okay, culture. Yeah, gotcha. I want to make sure that we talking about that part of it. Yeah, the culture. Okay.
The culture is actually can be leveraged, right? There are organs of influence out there. I mentioned the religious aspect. And when religion is mentioned, some people, especially, and it doesn't matter what you believe, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter what you believe. It's just a fact. It is an organ of influence. It doesn't matter whether you like BET or not. If it's going to reach your target audience and you're selling weave, you're going to go advertise over there. Okay. So there are these organs of influence that do exist. And you can use them as a way of leveraging and shepherding people to particular outcomes. And these particular communities that people are looking at and saying, oh, they operate as a collective, have just been doing this thing for generations and generations, such that the landscape is now such that they have a number of these families, a number of these other things, and they're just playing the game rather effortlessly, right? So and this is the thing about quote unquote culture. Culture is invisible, right? So, and this is something that I've had because I'm Nigerian, as you know, and born and raised in Nigeria, so on and so forth. And I've dated in the past African Americans, right? And one thing that was always some kind of cause for consternation was the idea that I did not have these cultural concerns, right? In other words, it seemed to me, from my perspective, that they were seeing culture as something that you do. You know, you go to these festivals and you talk about culture and you teach your kids about culture. And for me, it was just like, I just do what Nigerians do. No one ever told me what it was we were doing. We've just been doing it forever. You get what I'm saying? So when that whole superstructure thing is in place, it's invisible. You don't go talking about the Nigerian culture or how we all end up similarly doing certain kinds of things, whether it be sending scam emails or whatever. But it just happens, right? So that's the thing about the culture. And we mentioned before we got into this action part, we know that it's the more elusive part. Okay, it's the more abstract. It's harder to do, and it cannot just be done by one, if not even perhaps even in one lifetime. You know what I mean? It takes several lifetimes, several groups, and then it's instantiated, and then it just kind of perpetuates itself. So that is kind of what I'm saying is you are right when they say these are people just operating individually, right? But the culture is invisible, right? Yeah. Because it's already there. There's all these things that it just have been put in my head long time ago that I don't even think about. They're just in my head now. And it's not because, somebody wore a dashiki and told me some story and told me about my history and, Hotep. That actually is in my opinion, It does not work, right? That you have to go subliminal with culture. You have to go, to the underworld, if you will. And it does get a little weird when you start talking about collective action, especially with people like us. But I think that we can kind of see certain things, okay? That there are, for example, religious and quasi-religious groups. It could even be the Boy Scouts that profess hierarchy. Let's say, for example, you want to create the importance of hierarchy in a group. You don't just do that by, you have to do it through some kind of a system whereby it now just becomes invisible. Now, these boys that go to the Boy Scout, or these people that go to church or whatever, or they get bar mitzvah or whatever, they just believe in hierarchy now. You know what I'm saying? Like it just so happens to be that way. But let me bring some people into the chat so we can mix it up, because this is not our thing. I know that, but I think that, and you tell me if I'm wrong in terms of how I felt like it's better for people like us on the individual side of things to have a conversation about collective, because I just think it's more productive, because we're going to bring eyes to it that are different, as opposed to I could bring some Hotep guy here and he could tell me about,
Yeah. I give it 5 minutes and then he's just blaming white people for all the ills of Black America. That's just
exactly. Because I just felt like we're going to look at it more objectively and actually try to find where the handles are and so on and so forth. So let's bring in a couple of, we got K coaching, and we have the famous, the infamous heavyweight champion of Misogynoir came in here first. So what do you have for us? And then K coaching, you can we'll go to K coaching after that.
Right. What's up, Ike? What's up, Bernard?
What's up?
Right. So I think the conversation is interesting, but I think there's an elephant, a massive, big, overweight, obese elephant that's been out, unfortunately not been mentioned. So how does IQ play into this whole factor?
I have a feeling you're gonna tell us.
Right.
Or perhaps let me just say what strikes me, right? Obviously not well thought through, right? But when you say that, I immediately think there are certain kinds of people, and it goes to the reason why I wanted to have the conversation with Bernard. There are certain kinds of people, I'm biased, but I think that the kind of people who are more intrinsically motivated and so on and so forth, and maybe you could add IQ to that, right? These people are going to, quote unquote, make it out of the hood, or they're going to just thrive, right? In whatever the circumstances may be, because they find their wellspring of motivation from within. IQ may be part of that. I think also that is incumbent upon those people to play this chess game of collective land that we're talking about. Okay, it is not okay. So we're talking about how we're gonna shepherd people into outcomes and how we're gonna leverage the organs of influence and do this kind of thing and that kind of thing. And it's not gonna be done by Pookie, right? It's not gonna happen, right? So
it's gonna be one of those guys working on that assembly line, getting $20 an hour that I mentioned. Yeah.
Exactly. So those are my impressions when you mentioned IQ, Misogynoir. But you go ahead.
Right. Okay. Yeah. You got most of it. So okay, it's an interesting concept, because in the UK, for example, we have this school called Michaela Academy, and I've mentioned this before in a previous chat. But Michaela Academy, people can look it up. It is a school that was set up by a Afro-Caribbean woman, and her concept, she's a conservative, right? Now, in London, in this region, in East London, this is a region where there's mostly poor Black kids, right, who end up in this region. Now, the so-called high school graduation rate for these poor Black kids has always been in the low 20%, maybe high 30%, maybe 30%, where the kids get a so-called 5 A's to C. In the UK, for example, you have to pass your high school when you're 16, you have to get at least 5 C's out of 11 subjects. It sounds quite low, but surprisingly, many kids don't actually get the 5 A's to C's. Anyways, the point is, this woman, when she implemented a simple school where discipline was preferred, these kids don't have fathers in their household. These kids come from a lot of single mother households, etc. So they lack that kind of discipline, understanding of manhood, and they don't really seem to so-called care about their future or themselves. They don't have that kind of culture, history, and understanding of the education system. Now, when she set up this system where she told the kids, you can't bring in your phone unless it's like an old school phone, like basically, like no complicated system which you can utilize internet-based services. Anyways, the point here is she made a prediction, a simple prediction, and people even tried to stop her from opening the school, that if she sets up this school, this kids will be among the top performing schools in the country. Now, I'll send the link right now in a few minutes. Now, guess what happened? 4 years later, this school was within the top 5% performing schools in the country. And this is supposed to be so-called low IQ Black kids who come from broken homes, right? So my question here is that do you guys think that actually there are simple strategies to actually fix the system? It's just that we're working with regressive individuals who keep promoting that, everyone is an individual, everyone should be treated in a certain way, whereby you promote these education systems which kind of prefer those who actually think differently. What I'm trying to say is this, right? Most humans don't have this abstract ability to be able to perform well in any circumstance, or to be autodidactic and learn things despite the environment. Most humans are basically products of the environment. So if you change the environment, it's incumbent that you're going to get a significantly faster change of effect among these people. So why is it that we're not promoting this? I mean, this seems like a really simple strategy. Sure, it's one example, but I can dig out many, but it's not special. These kids are not self-selected individuals, like you say, in the African context, or in other kind of context of those people who get out. So let me put the link right now, Michaela Academy. Let me put the report.
Sergeant Noah always got the links, but so far, Bernard, what do you think about what he said? Because I don't really think that either you or I would disagree. Come in, instantiate discipline, and things will work out for the better. I mean, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah,
okay.
Disciplining good education is a good start. Yeah.
So K coaching. No, that's not K coaching. K coaching is whom you interviewed. But Coach Ali, what you got for us, sir?
What's going on, fellas? How we doing tonight?
We're doing excellent. How are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great.
Sorry I couldn't cam up, man. Y'all just caught me. I just got back from the grocery store with the family, but I won't be very, very long. And I just wanted to say a very masterful conversation in regards to the collective and individual efforts. Bernard, actually, this happens on your channel a lot, but a lot of times people get into ideologies where people, get to fighting with egos and whose ideology is better. But as you both know, I'm definitely a pro collective person. As you both know, my whole avenue is families. And, when you look at what a collective is able to do compared to an individual, a lot of things are able to grow a lot. A lot of things are able to be more stable in their growth. So, for example, when you look at Bank of America was started by an Italian family, was called the Bank of Italy until 1930, November 1st, 1930, when they were able to serve more people. But, that family turned a small bank into one of the, the biggest banks that people use today. And it's only 90 years old. You know what I mean? When I look at the collective, you're looking at, what groups of people can you work with in the long run? And the reason why I say families are so important is if you look at, here in Detroit, the Detroit Lions owner is Henry Ford's great-great-granddaughter. And, when you look at with our situation in the Black community in particular, we always have to start over. And I wrap it up by saying that if you have more of a collective group and you have more combined initiatives, we'll be able to push a lot more things forward instead of each generation having to start over and building from scratch. And I'll leave it at that.
Go ahead, Mr. Ajanoa.
Right. So I have a question for you, Keiko Ping. So you mentioned that families are great, etc. But let me ask you a question. How does that work? I mean, so do you think that, if you fix a family, miraculously, we're going to have a whole system of very successful individuals that can promote some kind of legacy-based system that can get carried across several generations.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, you have to think about what the actual point of having children is and having a spouse is. I mean, a marriage is, yes, it's a business contract, but the purpose of having children is solving your community's problems. And again, when we have children, most people have children for selfish, selfish outcomes. You're not thinking about how your child could be the next brain surgeon. You're not thinking about how your child could be the next, lawyer that could be the, a big honcho in a larger case. We want children for our own selfish reasons, so we can go see Junior at the ball game. We're dressing up little Ashley and cute little dolls. We don't implement a system for our children, and that's why nothing's able to be moved forward. Because we never have a plan for our children. We just kind of have them, raise them, and hopefully that they will figure it out on their own with no structure, and they'll be able to move the community forward in some shape or fashion.
Okay, that sounds great, but I would like to kind of criticize that kind of point of view a little bit. The criticism I'd like to add is that fixing the family is not going to fix the community at any large scale. You still need to create superstructures that people can utilize so that the family structure works in parallel to that structure that will then allow the family to be fixed. A lot of Black men are still acting like women. A lot of Black men still have this issue whereby they don't know what it is to be a man. They still act using blame mechanics. Now, blame mechanics, we all know what it is. It's like, well, this is this way because of this. They would usually mention slavery or some kind of other thing, some metastructure of the man, whoever that man is, because a man should be a man of his own domain, shouldn't be making any kinds of. A man should never say it's because of this. They should understand, okay, yeah, this is why we're here, but this is relevant for this point. We need to transcend. Every time I've engaged in this conversation, some person comes in, and I was an Obsidian report and said, well, no, it's the white man, it's slavery, it's government. The moment you still have people doing this kind of stuff.
Massage, hold on. I was gonna say, but Bernard, go ahead. What were we gonna say?
You said you were on Obsidian, and Obsidian was saying no, it's slavery in the government.
No. Someone else in
the chat room.
No, who I was speaking to in the 1-to-1 as well. There were some people called in.
I'll say this just to speak up for my little space in the Black manosphere and those that I am closely associated with in it. We don't play that excuse making game. Whenever somebody super chatted something about slavery, and I almost said don't super chat nothing like that no more. That whole slavery excuse, blaming racism, blaming the white man, that don't fly over. And it's a pro-Black sector out there that me and Ike have poked fun at multiple times that blame every ill of Black America on white people. I'm not with that. I just want to make that very clear. And most of the Black men that I associate with in the Black manosphere, we are not with that. We believe that America is capitalism, and you got to roll your sleeves up and figure out a way to grab your biggest piece of this American pie. So I don't. When you're hitting Black men with I feel like you came to the wrong place to hit Black men with that broad brush. There's a sector that you can go to, and they will fight with you all day on that. But you're barking up the wrong tree. I feel
yeah. So misogynoir. Let's get down to brass tacks, because we get it. And I actually, Bernard, I mentioned very specific. I haven't even used his words. I used his PhD words. I said the superstructure, or I said undergird. What do we want to say? That supports families, so on and so forth. And yeah, you're talking about a superstructure that will somehow beat out the blame mechanics out of men. Why don't you just tell us how you're going to do that?
Right. Okay. Yeah. All right. See. Okay. Specifically men and women into their own, whatever space, are lacking social inclusion into these mechanics. Basically, all systems that existed in history have had this kind of rites of passage that men get to become a man at a certain age, at a certain frequency, at a certain particular moment. If you are in the so-called savannas of Africa, you part of the Maasai tribe, for example, you have to learn how to kill a lion when you're around 12 years old, and when you kill this lion by yourself, actually, there'll be people around to kind of help you make sure you don't get eaten completely. But you are supposed to go and hunt a lion, find it, track it, be safe enough around it, and then kill it by yourself. Now, if you can't do this, you don't become a man. That means you don't get married. That means you don't contribute in society as part of this so-called man. The problem is in the West, we don't have this kind of a similar system where womanhood or manhood is implemented. Now, why this is significant is because if you do, regardless of your predisposed psychological profiles, if you are kind of forced into acceptance of reality and its harsh truths in a system like this, it's going to make you far more likely to succeed, even if your psychological profile isn't necessarily. So,
what is the Western modern, perhaps we're because presumably we don't do that over here,
right?
And presumably we need it. As a matter of fact, it is agreed. I've said that much so far. How? Right? How?
Okay. How can we do it? Okay. Well, okay. This is a little bit. This is an interesting question. There's several ways. There are several ways. One way is actually incorporating business hunter mechanics into a church or Islamic whatever based system. So I'll explain what I mean by this. What you have to do is you'd have to infiltrate a belief system that already exists. And, for most people, it's either Islam or Christianity. Let's say Christianity more often than not. You infiltrate it by strong, people who understand the capitalistic nature of reality. Once you infiltrate it, you set standards, rules, and laws and customs that exist within it. So, for example, you begin by setting up a hierarchy system. This hierarchy system is going to be a reward system whereby individuals, children specifically, are going to go through this kind of scouts-based system, but with a very unique set of rewards in there.
You mean like Boy Scouts type stuff, right?
A little bit like that, but in this one's going to be incorporated with so-called business.
Let me make sure I understand something. I think early on, did you say family structure wouldn't help this?
No, I said it wouldn't be the answer with it by itself. A lot of people tend to think that it.
Now, can I respond to that when you're done?
Wait a minute. Wouldn't it take good, intact families to take these boys to Boy Scouts and give them that rite of passage? Or if it's religious institutions involved, yes. Families going to church, taking children to church, passing down this thing. Right. You're saying families is not the answer. The only opposite. Hold on. The only opposite of that is no children being created or raised, or baby mamaism, what we got going on right now. Baby mamaism, baby daddyism, basically non-intact families. So whatever everything you're talking about doing, I think what you're saying is good, but if you don't think intact families is the foundation of it, well, who's going to be doing all of this stuff?
All right. See, that's the thing, right?
No structure would be sufficient.
Yeah, rogue women are going to do all of this by themselves. I mean, how does that work?
Oh, right.
See, okay, Misogynoir, is this a parallel thing? They need to be done together? Is that your simple answer, or are you going to give us a PhD answer?
Right. Okay, so the reason I actually had to criticize that point is that most times people think that is the solution, but it's not the solution. It's the foundation to the solution, but it has to be parallel. You have to do things both at the same time. Otherwise, you're still playing catch-up game, right?
Real quick. I agree with that one. If we have families, but bad families that have bad principles and bad customs,
right,
and bad traditions, we will run into the same problem. Right. So yes. So now we're in agreement. If we can start with the foundation is family, and then you're saying all the other things, then you're speaking normal black manosphere logic right there. Yeah.
Can I take home at the point, Bernard?
Go. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not refereeing this, but I mean,
brother Ike, you mind if I proceed?
Go ahead.
Okay, and then I'll wrap it up with this: is that you obviously families are the foundation of what's going to be the answer, because if you can't govern a family, how can I expect you to govern a business, a political office, running a country? I can't, and there are certain individuals that could do it, but for the most part, most people in those higher positions have families, because when you look at them, they have governance amongst the people in their families. They govern their wife, they govern their children, and they have their little governance in their own little home intact. If I can't see you monitoring something as minute I can't really call it minute, but in a larger scale, if I don't see you, managing or governing something as minute as a family, how can I trust you to move forward with the next step when your own home is out of order? You know what I mean? Family is going to be, when we talked about structures and systems when it comes to effort and outcomes, you can't, build a building without the foundation, and that foundation is family. And I'm gonna hop off.
Right.
I appreciate everyone's time, and I'll be in the chat.
Right. That's
Misogynoir, hold on one second, okay? I'm going to, because you guys went back and forth a couple of times, and everyone else also heard it. It is related to the topic. In conjunction to whatever they're going to say, I'm sure they're going to include things that they want to say that perhaps will cover what you're going to say, Misogynoir. But next is Dr. Thunder. I believe you said no structure will... Did you come in with the nihilism, Dr. Thunder? Go ahead, Dr. Thunder.
Not exactly. So I think what Misogynoir was starting down the path of is describing a different version of a religion. Maybe the religion had more teeth in it, and then therefore could sort of force certain behavior, right? So unless we're in a theocracy or something, there's not really a way. So the free will thing and the freedom thing gets in the way of these sorts of structures that we already have. If people would just follow what we already know to be true, if they would just, for instance, if you're Christian, I'm Christian, if people would just follow the Christian principles and do things in a particular order, then most of these issues that we're talking about would be non-issues, right? The family structure would be in place. A lot of these issues between men and women would not be the case. The feminism thing wouldn't be the case. I mean, a long list of things that seem to be like the issue. When you start to remove those fences, and you don't know why they're there for, there might be a dog back there, or a German Shepherd. So now what I wanted to say though, because we earlier was mentioned this, I too, I'm like you in that I have no need or desire to see someone that looks like me achieving something to show me that I can do it. All right. But when I have this conversation with my wife, she is, and it's not that she necessarily, I don't necessarily think that she needs it, but she's convinced that she needs it, and or that children, and like this, we were having this conversation, something like about the president, well, we had the first black president. Now little kids can believe that even if they're black, they can be president. And in my mind, I'm like, I that had no impact. It has zero impact on anything that I'm thinking about at all. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to her about the 4-minute mile. So, the story about the 4-minute mile, breaking the 4-minute mile. They saw it as being this impossible thing. No one would ever do it, right? And so then somebody breaks the 4-minute mile, and then that week, dozens and dozens of people also break the 4-minute mile. Now, that may seem to disprove what it is that I'm saying, but actually, in my mind, I want to be like the person that broke it in the first place. I don't want to be the person that's sitting around waiting for other folks to do something. But if we're honest, it's a very small percentage of the population that are going to be the first.
Right.
And almost everybody else is going to be the follower. And so even though Ike, you and I are wired that way, we can't be blind to the fact that that is not the usual thing.
Right.
And such a small percentage of people are wired that way.
That sucks.
Yes, the rest of us, we need to see that succeeding by others in order for us to do well. And this is why I set up at my university the Centers for Engineering for Women and Black and minority ethnics, so that we can feel empowered as well. So that when we see people who, you know, resemble us, whether they're women or maybe they're, you know, ethnic minorities, that we can feel empowered to actually do well as well. Not all of us are wired like you or Ike or Bernard to some extent. Some of us do need this, and I guess acknowledging that is going to, I guess acknowledging people's weaknesses and strengths will allow for us to unify better and move forward in a better mechanism. You're not going to trust your McDonald's worker with, you know, managing a bank portfolio, right? You're not going to say, well, they should be able to. You say, okay, this person, this is their limit. We need to make them, give them a system like a computerized system with all the appropriate things to place into the tab so that they can kind of just do the job without having to do all the pre-thinking. You make the system easier so that even the least talented individual can still perform at a relatively preferred kind of mechanism.
Okay, so speaking of computers, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say this last thing, and then I'll drop down and I'll start whipping the chat again. That's my job. I'm the chat whip. So. One thing also, not directly related to what we just said, but somewhat. So you have sort of there's different philosophies on what's going to bring forth change, right? You have this sort of civil rights model, which everybody else has replicated. You know, the transgender, the alphabet folks, they have used the same structure that was developed, right? Much of that is sort of the E.B. Du Bois model, right? It's the protest model, right? You get out in the street, you make your grievance known, you make noise, right? You tell them that you're not going to take this anymore. And I'm not trying to belittle that, because I think at some point, I think that there is some value in that. And obviously, the way our country is, we have the right to do that. All right. But then there's the Booker T. Washington model. And that model is more like, stay quiet, do your job better than everybody else, be the smartest dude in the room all the time, outwork everybody, right? And change the thing one person at a time from within, right? And so the plus of the protest model is you can sort of, through fear, you can kind of force people to give you stuff probably quicker than you would have gotten it. All right, otherwise. But you don't know why they did it. You don't know if it was out of the goodness of their heart or if it's just based on fear, and then you don't know how long it will last. Right?
Okay.
Because once people,
yeah, that's interesting.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But the other model, the plus of that is that there's a more, because it's on a one-on-one kind of level. I mean, you're making a huge impact there. It's going to be more of a permanent impact, but it's super slow. It's like snail speed, and you have to be okay with that. But these are sort of those are kind of the tools that we have at our disposal when we're talking about this whole equality discussion. So I just thought that was interesting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Thunder. You basically, spelled out, the Booker T. Washington or the Neil deGrasse Tyson model, as Bernard said earlier, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of computers, like 2 sentences ago, with this ridiculous segue that I'm trying to make, we have JB in the house, and I believe that's Jonathan, right? And so we had 2 PhDs and a software engineer and another engineer, and but please make it concise, gentlemen. I know how you guys are. All right, all right, Jonathan, it's your turn.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so I will make it concise so I don't get roasted. So, so
Are you
okay.
a coffee bean?
You said what?
Are you a coffee bean? You said you don't want to get roasted.
Oh God. Okay, so yeah, so I had two things I wanted to add to this conversation. So the first thing is I think there's a self-fulfilling prophecy aspect of this that I don't think was discussed, right? So I mentioned in a few streams back, I forgot which stream it was, that I used to be a social justice warrior, right? And so a lot of that goes around the whole, we actually talked about, the individualistic versus collectivist mindset and stuff like that. And I found that like a big issue for me, like in practice, was that it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I can actually give you a very specific example, right? So when you're like always thinking about the collective, right? Because you know, at the end of the day, if you're Black, you grow up in the hood or whatever, like I don't want to leave my people behind. I want to look out for my people, right? And I completely, bought into that, and to a certain extent, I still believe in a lot of that. But what it ended up doing is, so here's a specific example, right? So not this current role, but my previous role, right? I had two options when I was taking the previous role that I had, the previous engineer role that I had. I had two offers, right? One of the offers was from this little, I think they're a nonprofit, but it's like a social justice. Their goal is like social justice and whatnot. They fight for Black people and whatnot. And it would have been a higher role in terms of my title and stuff like that. But less challenging work in terms of like, there's not really much engineering work. It's mostly just, advocacy and stuff like that. And so like I would have been more like an IT guy, compared to like writing code and whatnot. And it would have paid me much less money, right? But and then I had this other offer where like, I'm getting paid, what I negotiated, and it's an actual engineering, like real challenges and stuff like that, right? And I had this battle with myself where it's like, the role that was better for my career and for my progression was clearly the one with the better engineering challenges, because, whatever the next role is, I get to describe that. I get to say, here's what I did, here's the system I implemented, here's why I wrote this algorithm, etc. And then I had this other option where, it would have actually, if I named the organization, most of you guys would probably know them. Like it would have given me some kind of like, probably like some status or whatnot in the activist community. I would have probably been a face. You guys would have probably been more familiar with me and stuff like that, especially, given my age and whatnot. And so it would have given me this like kind of social capital within the activist community, and it would make it seem like I'm fighting for the Black community. But here's what it would have done as a negative. The big negative is this would have actually been a net negative for my career, right? Because essentially, I would end up pigeonholing myself, right, into this role, and it would have been hard for me to progress, right? And so now it would have actually helped me justify even more why, me being Black or all the other things, why it's harder for me to progress in the long run, right? In the long run, be like moving forward, rather than realizing, hey, I picked the bad opportunity, I would have basically went with, is it because I'm Black or all these other reasons, right? And so the point I'm making here is that when I was making that decision, it was actually tough for me at the time. Like now it wouldn't be tough for me, to be quite honest. But at the time it was very tough for me because I felt like, damn, I have to pick this because, I'll be doing good for Black people and whatnot. But now, like if I'm being in a position I am now, like that role actually definitely helped me, right? Because I've progressed and I have, I'm able to, build more resources. And then in return, I can actually do more eventually, like, because my long-term goal is to potentially do more. Whereas am I making sense? Like, so I feel like a lot.
Okay. So hold on, right? You had the opportunity to go to a place that was more about taking collective action. However, it came with additional downsides of not being paid and also not doing the kind of work that you wanted to do, but you were conflicted about it, right? Long term, you can go and do what you want to do, actually get an actual skill, get more money, and you could probably have a bigger impact. Plus, you can also play the Neil deGrasse Tyson aspect of things, whereby you can be the well-trained, well-versed, highly skilled coder, which is more beneficial to the black community to see, as opposed to some IT guy in some hotep organization, right? So so you're making sense. You're making sense. So we have another panelist. Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Audra. I'm claiming to be I thought interesting convo. I thought I could contribute a couple of contrasting, perspectives or whatever. Stir things up.
What you got for us? What you got for us? Stir it up.
Well, some of the stuff we're talking about definitely interesting. Talking a lot about, marriages and children and stuff. And so, I'm an odd duck, but I am from the other half of the equation. So I might be able to. I am, yes.
Okay.
So, but I'm also, I'm like I said, I'm an odd duck, but so I can add a little perspective there. I also have sort of a relevant perspective, is that I'm a longtime martial arts instructor, and so when these conversations come up, my actual sort of personal investment and experience comes from that background, because I've actually worked, end up being a not a full parental figure, but a pseudo parental figure for a lot of kids over time, as well as, even though I had, a stable family and parents, my Taekwondo instructor, my martial arts instructor, like I definitely, like you can, if you were to kind of map out my development, definitely had an impact of a third parent. So, another kind of just an interesting little, because that was coming up, I think, earlier in the conversation, talking about, okay, well, if not for sort of the standard family structure, where could some of these roles be fulfilled, right? And so I think I have a little bit of experience where, one example of where some of that can, it does happen. Anyway, so those are kind of the thoughts.
That is interesting, because Bernard Riley over here, you had the principal. That was your stream, right? Or it was your stream, right? You had the principal of Sacramento High School, I believe.
Oh, yes.
Yes, come in and talk about, doing the work in this particular community, economically, I don't know the word to use, right? And the fact that these guys, or whatever, the teachers and so on and so forth, these institutions spend like 8 hours a day and so on and so forth. But then you have the other side of the equation where people are like, oh, well, but it doesn't matter if, the first half of their, how about the other 16 hours of the day, and their parents are doing this, and their mom's selling whatever, and so I don't know, Bernard, overall, based on also what Audra just said, and based on that stream that I watched of yours, now I know there's obviously a balanced type of a simple, trivial kind of answer, right? But what are your thoughts on that whole thing about these institutions, or these other ways, non-traditional family, so on and so forth, helping? Let's just keep it that simple.
What exactly do you mean by non-traditional family?
Oh, I just mean they're not the family. They're teachers, they're instructors, they're some kind of I don't know. You get what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah, I'm divided on mentorship. I'm divided on that. The conversation got a hand with the high school principal, because he was talking about doing his job and going above and beyond, where he's doing stuff and he's reaching out to kids after school. If a kid comes up missing from school for a while, he'll go riding through the neighborhood to try to find the kid. Like, he was talking about going above and beyond. And some people were saying he was doing too much. I don't knock him, obviously that's his job, but I think a lot of the time, if you looking at a lot of broken families or houses that were never homes, it was never actually a family. It was just I'm talking about the high single mother rate, where it was never even an actual intact family. It was just it was an is what it is situation where we know what happened, we know how it went down. It was the two people that were just getting together, having sex, and oops, she got pregnant. Oops, baby came out. As far as that actually working, no, I mean the data is clear on that. That yeah, being born into a single mother household in America is statistically not good for a kid. I don't want to talk about the exceptions to the rule. We know overall it's not good for a kid. So I don't look at that, and I don't think mentorship is the answer. I think that's could end up de facto enabling the bad behavior, that going back to the culture, that can end up enabling the culture. People can be reckless and have kids in a bad situation, and the community is going to come and rally together to make sure little Johnny, comes out okay. And then so it's nobody gets to even feel the results of their bad decisions. They feel like it's okay. The community is rallying behind it. Well, it's okay if single mothers is a relatively small problem. It's cool. Yeah, the community ought to rally around it. But if the single mother rate is that high, then the community or the culture needs to be more geared towards we need more families intact and together, and need to figure out what's going on with either the relationships or the breakdown in families, or was it ever even a relationship to begin with? Are people just being reckless, getting pregnant by the person that they hooking up with? Yeah, those problems need to get solved, if any problem is going to get solved, because it's not going to get solved without intact families. Just looking at the outcomes, just looking at the data and the outcomes, the stats, the way the statistics bear out for Black people born into a situation, into a two-parent household, the numbers are clear that the outcomes are better. So all the other external stuff that tries to come to show up late to the party to fix the problem, I'm not. So you gotta be preventative. So that's where I'm at with that.
Okay, so let me ask Audra this. Okay, you heard what Bernard said, right? There are almost two sides to it, where it's like, well, at least two sides, where it's like, well, there is the actual outcomes. Well, does this actually help? Where's the data on this? Or is it just, you guys feel good on a Tuesday and, hey, look, I was able to put a smile on this kid's face. That's number one. And then there's number two, there's this other kind of Sparta kind of idea of, no, there will be no help. There will be no encouragement of this. They will burn, So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I don't think it's a simple dichotomy. It's not an either or, and I'm definitely not going to argue, because I would agree with Bernard about, that the sort of the best solution is, a stable family, because that's, just quantitatively, that's definitely always going to have more of an impact than anything else. So I think, kind of what the sort of mentorship or kind of perspective that I'm looking at is, I don't think that necessarily means that it isn't a worthwhile improvement, right? It's like, no, it's not going to reverse the fortunes of those that are kind of set up not so well. But it could go from really bad. It could help it go from really bad to somewhere in the middle, right? Not catch up to they'd had a stable family. But I do think there's benefit. I would also just point out, I think that the way in which it occurs, and to be honest, sort of the discipline and system within, is going to have an effect. So my perspective, of course, is coming as a martial arts instructor. So yes, it's does resemble an education environment to some degree, but it's also relatively small environment. It's not, at least from my experience. So I'm from a rural area, a lot of not a high income kind of place. Like I've seen all kinds of students come through. I've seen some of them, and then I've instructed them. So there's a lot of different circumstances, and overall, I do think that there are occasions where myself and other instructors that sort of take it the right way, and we don't really go it our way, but we do improve their sort of stability. Just, you know, give them a role model, give them tools and like, because a lot of what we do in martial art, specific to the martial arts training, I do think that's relevant, right? I don't think all sorts of I think all sorts of, a good mentor figure is good to some degree, but I would probably posit that some variants are more tend towards affecting the areas that have more of an impact.
I understand where you're coming from with that. I mean, I coached basketball, so I can relate in that sense that if you're coaching kids in basketball, you're doing some de facto mentoring. So I do understand it from that perspective, but I don't like when an overemphasis is put on it to solve the large problem. I think
I would agree with you there. It's not the big solution, but I'm someone who's like, but I think it can be recognized as, because the thing is there's never going to be a, tomorrow the solution occurs and it's all over. You're always going to be dealing with different levels of solution application and, the solution taking and that sort of thing. And so I think being aware of, always to sort of benefit it. And also, of course, just looking at it going, well, we can't, what are we going to do? Abandon the ones that have already, that are already teenagers that, well, too bad they weren't born in an era where we had solved the problem, right? So it's always sort of
can I add a point?
Okay, go ahead. You can add a point, Jonathan.
Okay. Please stop me if I'm not being concise enough. So,
okay, try to be concise.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to actually make a point. That and this might be a little touchy. I'm saying this beforehand, right? But I wanted to add a point about the specifically when it comes to individualism versus collectivism, specifically regarding like and we touched on this before, the victimhood mindset, right? And the reason it's a little touchy is because and early on, even Bernard actually had a live early on, and Sergeant Bernard got in a bit of trouble for touching on this a bit. But basically, so
y'all niggas.
All right. Okay. So I want to make sure I say this properly. So, okay, let me put my cards on the table, right? So I'm Haitian American, right? I'm Haitian American. So I have I'm Haitian American, but I grew up, in America, and I was actually born in Haiti, grew up in America, and but I did actually go back to Haiti a couple of times and lived in Haiti, right? And I think that's helped me, have this very like multiple perspectives on a lot of this stuff, right? So like in a lot of cases, when I hear ADOS or foundational Black Americans, when they talk about certain issues, I completely understand where they come from because I grew up with them, right? And I was socialized just like them. But at the same time, when I hear a lot of immigrants a lot of times talk about things, I think there's this big disconnect sometimes. There's this big disconnect sometimes that causes issues. So a lot of times you'll hear ADOS Black folks, they'll say, they'll describe the fact that, let's say, Black immigrants will come to America and they are much better off, and then they will talk down on them or look down on them and stuff like that, and so they'll see that as kind of like somewhat of a barrier, but also this kind of like enemy that gets presented as, oh, they're just like you, why are you not making any progress? And the interesting aspect of this that I wanted to provide, and I think you may be able to even relate to this as a Nigerian, is that I think a lot of times there's a nuance to this that people don't see. The nuance is that, when you think about the immigrant that's coming to America, right? In a lot of cases, right? So I can think even of my own family, right? A lot of cases, like they're coming from a country that's a third world country, right? And in their case, like, they're escaping like real, like dictatorships and all types of things, right? And they see America as this place where it's this land of opportunity. And, I get, I get to have all this opportunity I can do. And then they come to America, and in a lot of cases, like, so me being Haitian, come to America, and, my mother came to America with us as little kids, and, you end up living in a neighborhood with Black Americans, or, with where there's all the other Black immigrants as well. And all you see at least from their perspective, right? This is not me justifying it, but I think providing this perspective may be important. All you see is, oh, look at all these black people, these people who look like us, but all they're doing is complaining.
Yeah.
Now, their complaints are very reasonable, right? But the immigrant doesn't see that, because the immigrant is like, I just came from a country where, like, you know, I'm literally escaping, you know, potentially dying for just saying something bad about a politician, right? And so I'm coming to America, chasing this opportunity, and I'm looking at all of you guys, and you're here, and I had to, like, you know, save money for 10 years, right, to be able to even, like, file the paperwork, right, to do all this to get here, and you're here, and all I see is complaining, right? And so that's right. And so the point I'm making is not justifying their thought process. It's just explaining why they think like that. Because a lot of times, like for me, I'll actually shut down those conversations when I'm talking to black immigrants. Like I'll, you know, because I'm like, I grew up with a lot of those black men and those black people, right? And I'm like, I'm not gonna let you talk down on them, but I understand their perspective, right? I understand their perspective, and the reason I bring this up is because I think that all of that connects to the collective versus individual. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to better ourselves, right? We're all trying to better ourselves, and we're trying to better, you know, black people or whatever we consider our community, our group of people, right? And until we see past these things that I think divide us, because you know that divide us or make us see each other as enemies and whatnot, I feel like we're not gonna get it far at all. So I find, you know, for me, that's one of the things that I try to, at least in real life, you know, when I talk to, you know, friends of mine who are ADOS and we have real conversations in real life, that's one of the places where I try to connect with them, where I try to get them to understand, like, you know, it's not really that the black immigrant is talking down on you. It's that they're looking at you wondering, wait, I spent 10 years trying to get here, right? And you're here, and you're just complaining. You're just complaining.
Yeah, so let me. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bernard.
I was about to say I already cracked the code on this earlier on my show. What that amounts to is the exceptional we'll just use Africans and African Americans. The exceptional African is looking at the average of black Americans and comparing himself as an exceptional African who worked extremely hard, saved up 200,000 Kenyan shillings, which amounted to 2,000 American dollars, to come over here. If you can save up 200,000 shillings, you are an exceptional African. So yes, when you come over here, you're doing better than the average black American, just like the exceptional black American is doing better than the average black American, and looking at him like, dude, why are you complaining? I'm here just like you.
So Bernard, I agree.
I got 24 hours in the day, just like, let me just finish. It's some black Americans that I look at and say, like, dude, I got 24 hours in a day just like you, man. Come on, do something, figure something out. Like, so I mean, but if every African isn't over there saving up 200,000 Kenyan shillings. They're over there in the country. Let's just use Kenya, for example. They're over there not doing what they have to do to either get out of there or be exceptional while there.
I would like to respond.
So Bernard,
you guys have an average and we have an average. So that's what that comes down to. But don't compare your exceptional to our average. And I'm not going to compare our exceptional to your average.
so Bernard, I actually agree with you on your point there, but just to clarify, I think there is I think there is this, I would say a fallacy, but you know, and you guys, you know, if you have a different opinion here, that you know most or maybe a good portion of the black immigrants that and I feel like this conversation is getting derailed. So, but let me just make this point. So I feel like there's this fallacy that most black immigrants who come to America, based on the example that you just took, are actually exceptional, right? And that's not necessarily the case. And so, like when I took the example of so I get the point you're making, but
200,000 Kenyan shillings is exceptional.
Well, yeah. So let me just finish making the point, right? So I get the point that you're making, right? If they're saving us what is a good amount of money, then they must be in a better position. Is essentially what you're saying. But
no, not a better position. An exceptional individual who would thrive and kick ass wherever you drop him off on planet Earth. He would figure out a way to do well.
Sure. If that's the case, then I agree with you. But I'm just going based off of like what I've seen. It's like, at least for example in the Haitian community. Let's talk about, because I'm not Nigerian. But let's say for example black immigrants coming from the Caribbean, right? Like I can give you examples in my actual family where, for example, my father, right? I have some cousins that live in Miami, and when they were coming, there was like a period of 3 years where they literally could not make any progress on their immigration because they had no money. And so like they have to like reach out to a bunch of family across the United States to try to get funding, to try to see if somebody could maybe help them fund their way into you know, doing the paperwork or doing what's necessary. So what I'm saying is it's not as clear cut. It's not as clear cut.
Were these people in the States?
No, the people, yeah, they're calling family that may be already here and maybe
How did they get here?
Say what?
How did they get here?
Similar process. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of people maybe trying to help each other. But my point is, it's not as clear cut as they were in a better position or more exceptional or things like that. It's not as clear cut as that. Is my point.
Let me cut this off at this point, because, and I think that perhaps Jonathan, you should watch, if you haven't, the conversation I had with Bernard Riley on his channel about this. And Bernard had the provocative title, do Africans have a better, yeah, he went all there. He said, do Africans have a better mentality than African Americans? I'm sorry, who was saying something?
Sorry, that was me. Before we cut this off, could I just make a small intersect?
Okay, wait, hold on. I'll let you say that, okay? Let me just state, however, that there is it needs to be stated, first of all, that everyone is in the milieu that they're in, okay? And everybody is looking at things based on that particular condition, okay? That someone coming out of a jungle, okay, has a different kind of baseline for what's hard and what's not hard, okay? This is just true of all immigrants, regardless of whether or not they are, when I say all immigrants, I mean immigrants, okay, coming out of the West, in places where nature red in tooth and claw, so on and so forth, right? You just have a different baseline for what there is to be complaining about, okay? And I think that part is super important. Whether you saved up 200,000 shillings or not, whether you're exceptional or not, you're actually coming from a place where it's crazier shit is going on in the streets, right? So when you come over here, you're like, why are you complaining about that? It's because your baseline of what is worth complaining about is very different. And this is just objectively true. Okay? So before you start comparing, well, who's objective, and this doesn't matter about the outcomes. I'm not talking about outcomes here, who does better. I'm just talking about mentality. It is just true that anyone who comes to the West is going to look at what people complain about here, and has nothing to do with the ethnicities. We're going to look at everything that everyone is complaining about here and go and be like, what? You know? Then there's the additional fact that they came here for a purpose. Okay, an immigrant is coming here to tear up. I use the example of, the fox getting into the hen house. The fox is coming to the hen house for a reason. And it's not to play politics, okay? It's to tear up the hen house, all right? And they're coming from Foxland, where it's the jungle. They have a different baseline for what they're to complain about. So regardless of outcomes at all, this is just a fact. And someone like myself, or anyone who's psychologically or honest with themselves, will just know that. And it's not some kind of big reveal. It's just a fact. If you're coming from Calcutta somewhere, in some gutter, no offense to any jungle or Calcuttas of the world, right? You're just gonna say, what are you complaining about when you come to the streets of DC or Milwaukee? That's just how it's gonna be, regardless of outcomes or exceptional or not. You could be exceptional or not, but you're coming from somewhere where the baseline of crap is different. You're coming to America for a reason. There's a higher, nicer baseline, more equality and freedom type stuff. Over there, it's way more nature, way more jungle, right? And now I'll let Misogynoir add what he was gonna say.
Spot on.
Right. So actually, it's interesting because when I came over here, I saw a bunch of kids lining up for lunchtime, right? And I was thinking, what's wrong with these kids, right? Why are they lining up? When the lunch bell rang, I just ran into the lunch hall and was first. And they were like looking at me like I committed a huge sin, and I was just like, these retards are lining up when they can just go in, right? See, I still had that kind of nature mindset. Initially, my grades were perfect. They were much better than the other kids, until I became equilibrized and my grades kind of dropped and I became average in this case. Anyways, to respond to Bernard and Jonathan and I'll also order is this, for example, actually against Bernard's point is this: when exceptional people, and I'm referring to IQ in particular, when exceptional people actually have children with each other, the children's IQs tend to be very average. It tends to go back to the bell curve into the mean. So this would go against your point of them being exceptional, because even their kids, there is a generational wealth component that even their kids outperform the native kids of the land that they're in. So if it was mostly, like, as you said, because they were exceptional in some ways, then their kids wouldn't be exceptional. This tends to be the case. High IQ people bring about average kids. It doesn't tend to actually, statistically speaking, produce the same or even a similar level kind of abstractive potential. So there's that point there. You wouldn't explain.
Yes, and I would say that, just me and Bernard were talking about this earlier, and we did agree that cultural aspect is huge,
Right.
and that culture tends to be invisible. You don't know how come, but yes, it is because they bring over, in addition to having that other baseline of what complaining means, they also bring over this other culture, which we have been honest about here in terms of saying, hey, we do need to kind of, right? I mean, Bernard, we did already kind of say that, right? I don't know, you can respond for yourself, but I just wanted to interject that because that conversation was already had.
Right, because in my case, I mean, my mother is extremely, as you know, Bernard said, exceptional in the sense that she's able to, in fact, she got here because of a scholarship for a master's, etc. She worked extremely hard, blah, 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 etc. For me, I'm extremely lazy. I can't do things in the same way that she can. I don't like working. I don't like doing anything. I literally sit in my house all day, and I'm the complete opposite of what she is. I literally have no markers of success at all. So me succeeding has nothing to do with my exceptionalness. It's mostly to do with culture, because, you know, I was instilled that I have to do well in school somehow, and, you know, I just fell in line and managed to do okay in school, and, you know, whatever, etc. But I have no hard working. I am the laziest fox. In fact, I see the chicken there and I'm thinking, someone got to kill that chicken, then I'll buy the chicken off them and then I'll eat it, right? I'm not out there trying to go hunting chickens. I have no markers of, you know, industrialization. I think what Bernard's talking about is the industriousness. It's part of the psychological profile of the Big Five, which is basically the likelihood of engaging with environments and working towards a certain goal, no matter the kind of incumbent nature of the environment hitting at you. And to respond to Bernard and Audra now with their points, so debating about whether it's what's more important, is it fixing the family factors or the so-called mentoring? See, this is actually why I disagreed with the panel earlier. Is I don't think it's either or. It has to be parallel. If it's not parallel, you're literally kind of like it's like you're trying to fix some kind of fabric, but you're only fixing one side, and the other side is ripping as you're fixing it apart. You have to be able to fix those agents that already exist and have already had a broken programming instilled in them, or rather not instilled in them. Those are the people born out of chaos. And then you also have to make sure that the next generation have that programming instilled in them automatically. If you don't do both of them, it will not work. It has to be at the same time, and both have to be focused.
Yeah, I think the reason why we tend to put an overemphasis on the family, because a lot of times with Black people, there's an overemphasis on the mentor, or these policies are wrong, or the school system is wrong, or the government need to do this or that, or somebody holding us back. There's a lot of Black people that talk like that. And so that's why what we tend to do, at least on my channel and a lot of channels similar to mine, is that we just drive home the point of personal responsibility and accountability. And if the other things also happen in alignment with it, then great. But I know where I like to put the emphasis. I like to put it on the individuals in question. Going back to the exceptional thing, you said you took it back to IQ. You keep bringing IQ into the conversation. I understand IQ matters, but you use yourself as an example when you talk about your mom, who was exceptional and got a scholarship, who came to America by way of scholarship. So if you're from whatever country you are from in Africa and you get a scholarship to some university in the United States, you are extremely exceptional and would have a very high IQ. And just from listening to you speak and how well you speak, I mean, I'm pretty confident that you don't have a 70 IQ or an 85 IQ. I'm sure you're in the 100s. So that sort of debunks what you're saying if you're going to use yourself as an individual example. Yeah. I mean, yes, you can have a high IQ and be lazy. You can be a lazy slacker. I mean, I'm sorry. You can be an intelligent slacker who still outperforms driven dumb people sometimes. I mean, it can happen either way. But so I don't. I mean, your individual example doesn't exactly work, and it does go back to what's another thing that Ike did talk about when he said, well, we talk about when we did our one-on-one on my channel. He said there is an immigrant mentality where they're coming over here for a specific reason. It was probably their goal when they were 12 to get over here. So obviously, when they marry, they're going to instill certain things in that kid, regardless of the IQ of that kid. But and I think it is true in the research that I've done on IQ that this is what I looked up, and you're going to prompt me to look this up again. I told you before I was going to do it, that essentially that it could range one deviation. So if two people with 115 IQs, they could very well produce a kid with a 130 IQ, or they could produce a kid with a 100 IQ. They're more than likely not going to produce a kid with a 70 IQ, and if they do, that's an anomaly. So what you're saying about IQ, even if we're going to use that as the factor, high IQ people tend to produce people with above average IQs. I mean, if that was the case, that
above average.
Hold on, wait, real quick. I can prove it real fast. There would be no distinction between the different IQs with the different races if it was the case. If it was the case that the IQ of the parents had nothing to do, like when they say the average IQ for Jews is 115. If it was the case that it wouldn't matter, then they wouldn't be able to come up with an average IQ for that group, or an average IQ for Asians of 105. If it was the case that the genetics or the IQ of the parents didn't matter, we wouldn't see different races having different averages. The fact that different races have different averages shows that the parents' IQ does dictate the IQ of children. That's obvious if we're going to use IQ, but I don't think that's the only factor. I think mentality and culture and what you put into the child, regardless of the IQ, is going to have an outcome. He may not be a theoretical astrophysicist, but he will be a productive individual if you instill the right things in him. So there's.
Hey, Ike, can I get 30 seconds real quick? Because I just want to just real quick.
All right.
30 seconds. Yeah. Okay. So to your baseline point, right? I just thought of an example that actually is really perfect. So when I was a kid, like I was getting in trouble a lot, right? And I was getting in trouble a lot, getting suspended from school, getting into fights and all that. And my mom, the first time I went back to Haiti, my mom sent me back to Haiti. That's what a lot of Haitian parents do when you become problematic. They send you back home, right? So my mom sent me back to Haiti, and I was living in Haiti, and I was with my dad. And we went to, I remember I was in this, there's this area called Delmartin-Tois. I was in Delmartin-Tois with my dad one time, and I seen all these kids sitting under, like it was like late at night, like 9 p.m., 10 p.m. They're sitting under these street lights on the street. And I asked my dad, like, why are all these kids sitting there? And it blew my mind. They were sitting there because they were studying, right? They were studying because there's no electricity. So they're studying for school. And here I am. I'm here in Haiti because I was skipping school. And these kids care about school so much that they're leaving home to come under the street lights and, as a group, right, to study. Right. And it's a kind of thing about baseline where it's like you would never see an American kid do that. Right. Ever. I could not imagine that. Right. But in Haiti, they were doing that because they valued education so much.
The exceptional kids in America that value education that much have electricity and they don't got to go under the street light to read. But they probably would do it.
Right. And we're not disagreeing. I'm just taking this example to say, like, for me, like when I'm coming from America, where I essentially, it made me realize what I was taking for granted, right? Because I was socialized like the rest of us, right? And so I go back to Haiti as a kid, and I'm like, wait a minute, they're actually doing this. Meanwhile, I used to skip school, right? Before my mom sent me back, I was skipping school, and I was getting in trouble. And I'm seeing this, and it actually blew my mind. Like it actually really did. And then just final thing, Ike. My mom's been in America now for 20 plus years, right? And to this day, because my mom lived through a dictatorship, to this day, if I call my mom right now and I start talking politics, if I mention Donald Trump, anything, she will hang up on me. Like she's so scared of discussing politics that to this day, 20 plus years later, right? Like because she lived through a dictatorship, she will not discuss politics, right? Again, baselines. So I just wanted to provide these examples.
100%. Now, someone asked earlier, and I had also asked Bernard, what the deal is with his channel. in terms of collective action. Because if we remember here, this is about individual efforts and outcomes versus collective efforts and outcomes. Why do we go about measuring these collective outcomes? Do they affect us? Yes, they do affect us in terms of perception. There is perhaps ethnic reputations or sex reputations or whatever, immigrant reputations, right? And if it's bad, then it'll affect the individual. It could actually affect the individual directly, so on and so forth. And we get into like, well, you can focus on yourself, but doesn't the family need a superstructure that requires family, so on and so forth? And then we got into the action part, okay? What is to be done? And this is where it gets crazy. It gets wonky because you have people like Misogynoir talking about playing high-level chess games, but I don't see the rope. I don't see it. You haven't told me, go get this loan, and there's this church in Mississippi that's just ripe for taking over. And then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that, and then we're going to do that. So I do get, the engineer in me does come out sometimes. Like, I got the philosopher artist side, but then sometimes the engineer in me comes out like, okay, well, how? Okay, what are we doing here? Okay, but the aspect of the blame mechanics is the a big impetus for me having this channel. So that's what I'm doing in Collective Land, okay? Is to make sure that men in particular, because I'm a man and I don't know how women roll, but being a man, I think it's 100% detrimental to have that blame mechanics. In other words, instinctively or intuitively or whatever, if I hear it from a woman, it doesn't make me cringe. But when a man says it, there's just something in me that just goes, oh my God, like I throw up in my mouth a little bit. So for me, the purpose of this channel, vis-a-vis collective efforts and collective outcomes, is just to show, hey, surgically remove that blaming stuff. That's why I'm always coming out here and being like, hey, 16-hour work weeks, master your subjective consciousness, go out there and get the bag, while also meditating, while also doing everything else, and while also dressing nice and doing all this other crap. I don't want to hear no excuses. I don't care where you're from. I don't want to hear about your mama, all that kind of shit, right? So for me, that is kind of why I am doing that. So I'm going to ask the panel, because we kind of need to wrap it up, because I know that Bernard is in the East Coast. It's approaching midnight over there.
I'm falling asleep on you, man.
He's falling asleep. So I'm going to go, starting with Audra, and we'll end with Bernard. If you could just give a couple of minutes on collective action. Audra, you mentioned that you are a martial arts coach or teacher, right? And that also goes into the whole non-blame mechanics, that kind of stuff, because it goes into getting hit with reality, not as crazy as hunting a lion. But besides that, or you can put it within that context, how do you look at making an impact collectively, or what kind of collective efforts are you putting out there, and what kind of collective outcomes are you concerned about?
So I just a small point here, because I feel like I was going to ask you, but I think I understand, is addressing the actual things that I can do as an individual to improve the collective, which is, I'm going to say, that's my default perspective of kind of where, I look at it both ways, and that's kind of where I've been coming at it, rather than a collective method of affecting the collective. So to kind of address one of the things go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'm just trying to understand. You're trying to go from what can I do as an individual to address, as opposed to how can I pull collective strings? How can I go take over churches, which Misogynoir seems to be obsessed with? Go ahead.
I would say that is an individual action. I mean, okay. Myself, I do everything. So I think that my martial arts, it has shown to me, one of the ways it's first of all, I think that you can affect the collective. Another sort of, just plain tricky words here that I think it's important to point out. You can affect the collective by first affecting an individual, one individual at a time, right? So and that is an action that most individuals at most levels of various, dominance hierarchies can endeavor in, right? If you're an individual, you can not have much, but it's likely that you can affect one person and improve things, right? And then you can, if you move up in power, however that works out, and influence, you can affect more. So I, as a neighbor, I could be I could be a mentor as a martial artist, and I have been doing a long time, very successful. You know, I have increased my spread of I can affect a bunch of individuals. I consider it, you know, I'm touching individuals and changing them, but I have a whole bunch more of them, and I get to affect a lot of them that are honestly. And another interesting point is outside of most groups, other than maybe you might say most of the time it's sort of regional, a shared region. But you know, I affect a lot of kids that I don't see them. You know, we don't interact in any other circles. And then I think that it is valuable to for those of us that like to do so, to contemplate, you know, policies and solutions. And then as far as affecting those, once you think you've found some targets that need addressed, right? You're like, so this is a target. Here's a bullet that I think will hit it and do the right thing, you know, and move things in a better direction. You know, there are different ways you can have an effect on possibly implementing those. As an individual, you can share those ideas again at a low level without a lot of special influence. You can share those ideas with one person. I sort of have a policy, you know, I always will talk politics with anybody, and you know, I always hope that even if I never see them again, that there will be a step towards truth, you know, whatever that may be, just by engaging in the conversation. But then also,
do you think you're so in this particular conversation? Is this just an intellectual exercise? Is this part of your sharing of ideas or affecting collective change, or why are you here?
That's a component. I mean, I will admit to enjoying these types of conversations, particularly with other participants that engage at a like level, which I found is not easy to come by. You know, it's sort of a rare treat, but it also stimulates me, right? So I'm happy to, you know, share whatever ideas might you know, keep the pot bubbling to the audience, to you guys. But it also it works the same way on myself. Without engaging in conversation, my own perspectives and ideas and contemplations don't develop as well or balanced, right? So it's, you know, it's not as direct. It's a slower step, but yeah, it moves in that direction. And then the last little thing I was going to say, you know, beyond that, you can, as an individual, attempt to access or build influence within like political systems, because I've been engaged in that, both sort of. I mean, I've been a political candidate, and you know, not a traditional, but I've moved around in those circles, and also you can have, and another thing, people that I find, you know, they often default to sort of the political levels when they start talking about this. Well, you're going to run for office, or you got to get some person in office to do your thing, and I would say that I could prove this by my own actions, as well as it being a philosophical belief that I do think is not pointed out enough. You can affect the system by simply engaging in it, right? Just going and, you know, entering it as a role, like running as a candidate, and not trying to be so cautious and believing that you can have no effect until you are, you know, officially elected or whatever, right? There's, you know, you can say all the things, and the person who won, you know, if it's not you, they might hear all they go, you know, that all makes sense. Right, and then you don't actually have to deal with that silliness too, you know. So there's, you know, if you want to look at some silver linings,
Gotcha.
But you know, like you can affect these things at so many different levels, and this is I'm kind of passionate because I do feel like that is often not communicated. That's often overlooked, right? And I think, and the strategist in me, I'm a big student and sort of the perspectives of, you know, sort of the classic great strategists, you know, Napoleon, Miyamoto Musashi, all those, you know, like to me, those that all that makes sense, and that's also a perspective that's not understood. But I've tested and done it, but small motions that all move in the same direction, right? Small actions and small effects are cumulative, right? You can make big, like I would say that the biggest changes are made by that snowball effect, right? Because sort of one size fits all top down, you might affect 75% of your target population, but such giant maneuvers generally also have countering effects, right? They don't move everything. They're so complicated. They might move the ball mostly in forward, 4 steps forward, but it might also be 3 steps back. And so but in smaller, more targeted actions and effects, those, because they're smaller and more compact and more targeted, they can be more completely forward moving, right? They don't, you can do without the baggage. So you can actually accumulate those, you sum those up, and pretty quickly you can actually overcome, in many cases, in my observation, the forward momentum of the giant effects, because that was only one movement. So they're like, it's just one thing, which we like, but you could take, 100 tiny ones, but because they don't have the backward progress inherent, the baggage inherent in anything that massive, logistically, you actually can overtake them, rather quickly.
I see. And
anyway, those some of the thoughts that kind of have popped up with this conversation. My
100%. And I like that politics came in at the very end. I like that we did not talk about politics all the way to the end, because I didn't want to get it, because politics it just becomes an abstract whatever. So next is Jonathan, and I allowed Audrey to speak longer because she just came in and she made a very concise point in the beginning. And so now Jonathan, remember, it's about your particular collective outcomes, right? The collective outcomes that you care about, and the kind of action that you do or not do, or do you care, right? And go.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're basically asking me what, in terms of, for me specifically, what am I doing, or in order to improve the situation?
Yeah, and you don't have to even have to care, right? But do you care about collective outcomes, right? Any kind of measurement that is out there. And is there anything that you're trying to do in collective space, or you're trying to look at it, I'm doing it from an individual perspective and it's about having this outcome. I mentioned that no matter how, I'm very intrinsically motivated, I tend to be quite selfish and so on and so forth, but still I'm doing this channel, and part of it is to kind of, spread out that whole, take out that blame mechanics out of the minds of men in general. So is there anything that you're interested in that regard?
Sure. So I think it's very hard for me to get the collectivist mindset that I've grown to have completely, to get rid of it completely. But I do think in a more individualistic standpoint, like with a more individualistic mindset now, but with the goal of helping the collective in the long term. And I do try along the way, right, whether it's via social capital or whatever, to help the collective, right? So like if somebody, for example, needs access to something and I can get them that access, I will do my best, things like that. But I do have long-term goals. Like, I think for me, my main focus right now, if I'm just as straightforward as I can be about it, is accumulating resources. That's pretty much my main stance right now. And so we've talked about some of the ways I do that, but basically that's my main focus now, is accumulating resources, because I think there's very little you can do without resources. And so, and as I try to accumulate resources, as I work to do that, I'm also building my social capital, and increasing the level of access that I have in various spaces, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I look at it now, and I do really want to help the collective, but I'm not. I found that in the past it's been kind of a drag on me in a sense where it makes me feel like I have to be a martyr and I have this burden, whereas now I feel free to just chase what I need to chase and to improve myself, and then I feel like I will be in a much better position to help the collective.
100%.
Just one minor thing, like, one of the ways that I do help the collective though right now is things like with whether it's you or Bernard or Kevin or O'Shea, whatever. Like if I see Black men, for example, doing great things, I do my best to always support. Like I always do my best to support. So I will, and I try to put my money where my mouth is, right? So things like that. But But those are just more little gestures, right? But I have more long-term view of things, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and definitely appreciate it. You're one of the heavy-handed super chatters out here, and and we definitely appreciate it. And that answer is 100% legit, in the sense that resources are very useful. Okay, it's like people trying to dig holes, right? And then there's this guy making shovels, while everyone else is talking about, well, how we're going to dig it, or whom exactly is going to take the credit for digging it, and so on and so forth. And then someone is just quietly making shovels, right? And I think that's, that is very useful. So now we're going to get to Misogynoir. You know the question. You're a PhD. You're a smart guy. So. Inside joke.
Yeah, I might be a PhD, but I'm not smart. Anyways, so I like to go through what everyone said. So everything Audra said, I agree completely, and I would like to build from that. So I think obviously we have to play meta games, right? And that means there is good points at every level. So yes, do individual actions to affect individual change that then will at some point hopefully end up into a cascade of snowball effect, and then affects things at a greater scale. But we should also be aware of the strategy. If you're going to war, right, first you have to train the soldiers. So that's where the family fixing comes in. It's the training and instilling these practical ideals into these individuals so that they have a particular way of interacting with the environment. That's the training aspect. But but if you don't have a strategy, you still can't win the war. And that's why Audra comes in with the whole you have to have mentorship schemes. The mentorship actually allows the instillment of strategy into these individuals, so that when they interact with the environment, they have a far more likelihood of effecting probabilities towards the direction that is preferred. So if you don't do both of them, unfortunately, that's why these discussions usually kind of don't lead anywhere. It's because one side is more focused on individual actions, which is, I like it, because it's actually philosophically it's intellectually dishonest to actually have one preference over the other, because it's incumbent that you need both, and it always has to run parallel. Otherwise you're going to lose the war. You can train your soldiers as well as you want, but if there is no leadership, if there is no strategy, you are going to lose to an equally trained system. The only way you're going to win that war is if the other system is not trained. Right. And of course, that is not how the world works. Every system, especially since you're competing with systems that have already been successful for various decades. Right. So the point I'm making here is, yes, play loads of individual action games that will lead to individual change, but you must have a superstructure. And that's where it comes in with the church / Islamic centers. And now Audrey gave a perfect example of the martial arts, right? That is actually the same thing. I would say that you could infiltrate martial arts systems. It's just obviously church is easier because most people believe in God still. So you can kind of manipulate them. Yes, and I use the word manipulate because that's what it is. You can manipulate them into action towards the direction that you seem to be seeking. If we do all of that, yes, you could easily see a change within several decades, not even a long time.
Mm-hmm. That is very great, ladies and gentlemen. And Bernard, if he has not abandoned ship and passed out and started pouring his liquor, I'm gonna drop off the other and we're gonna and thank you very much, Jonathan, Audra, Dr. Thunder also, who came in, and Misogynoir. Always a pleasure, Misogynoir, to come in here with your agitation, and you always constantly trying to get us to take over churches. That's very interesting. But anyways, Bernard, if you can give the last word on this, okay? And just I found it, first of all, thank you very much for your time, okay? I know that this has gone long. You're in the East Coast, so on and so forth. But yeah. I also want to thank you for your input and everything. So I think I made the right decision, right? Because rather than have the conversation with someone who is going to have the other side, I think it was more beneficial for us to kind of agitate to trying to find, okay, what is useful about collective data? Does it affect us? How does it affect us? Oh, there's this thing called perception. Oh, there's this thing called families, and it's better if there are more families. How do we sustain them? Because that way they can kind of sustain over the long haul, and so on and so forth. And you do have a channel. You're going for the Neil deGrasse Tyson / Booker T. Washington kind of perspective. So I'll give you the last word, Bernard.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't I don't got a whole lot more to add right now. I think we said a lot, and like you said, it's getting late, and I'm I'm running out of spit. So, but definitely, just only thing I'll close it out with is that, like, my position, I believe in individual actions. Individualism is what matters, but the culture matters as well, and the culture can produce more individuals that do the right thing and do what they need to do to help the overall collective. But if your just focus is collective, then yeah, it's the conversations gets weird, and I think we expose that and unearth that every time we tried to walk down that path of going to collective land with it. So it was definitely a good conversation. Appreciate you having me on. This was had a great time, but yeah, it was wonderful. But that's where I'm at with it. I mean, we pretty much said what need to get said, and
we said it all and then some. 100% agree,
absolutely.
And thank you for your time. I know you got to go get some rest and prepare for your excellent stream tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm hoping I still get a stream going tomorrow.
Yeah, you got laptop issues.
I should. Yeah, well, it's kind of funny acting. I meant to go and try to and take it back or get a desktop or something today, but I didn't do it today, so I might do it tomorrow. So I might be off tomorrow. I don't know. We'll see. I might just do one more with it lagging a little bit. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out one way or another. But definitely had a great time.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, definitely appreciate our guest of honor today and all the other guests that joined the panel, and also the chat. And if I missed your super chat, if I did not read your super chat, I definitely apologize. I'm going to go now and try to see the ones that I can catch while we close this out. King Dodongo, or Dodongo, something like that. Okay. The King says, that was intense. Okay. Yes, that was intense. Great conversation. And yes, that's kind of what we do intense stuff over here sometimes, but it's always intense, whether we're talking about selling and closing the deal or mastery of subjective consciousness, or we're just talking lightly about collective action and outcome versus individual action and outcome. Okay. Or we're talking about Plato's Republic or whatever it might be. Okay. Let me go ahead and see if there are other super chats in the house that I missed. I know I missed a few. I put them on the screen, but I did not read them. But everyone is definitely, each and every one of those super chats was definitely much appreciated. Now I have lost them. They are lost to the algorithm forever. And the Roger report, I can't put it up on screen right now on StreamYard, but the Roger report has a super chat here that says, way too many people want any solution but black men being the head of their homes. Okay. Way too many people want any solution but black men being the head of their homes. We all know unless that happens, no other suggestion will work. Any significant scale, definitely. A lot of times it just ends up being this question of parallel versus, not in parallel, and things that are done in parallel still have one being more foundational, fundamental, okay, needing to be more emphasized than another. But you got to do it all. You got to do it all, whether in your individual life or when it comes to the community. And over here we have I said it with his $5 super chat. Thank you very much for your $5 super chat. And he says, family is key. The BLM supporting feminist single mom is not socializing her son to know that more is expected of him than his sister. No lion killed. No lions killed. No rites of passage, so on and so forth. Okay. And also we had good men, fellow Dusty, always dusting it up out here, causing a dust storm whenever he arrives. Okay. One of the best moderators out there in the manosphere. He says, all this dust all over the stream. In the chat room. Love to see it. Salute Ike, Bernard, and the guest. Dusties unite. Yes, Dusties unite for sure. And King Dodongo also said, great discussion panel, $9.99 super chat. Oh man, Salute said by Melodious Forever. Melodious Forever. Thank you very much. And that is it. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ike Ogiame, and I am your host. And over here, we talk about being better and doing better. And today, we tackled the question of individual outcomes. Individual outcomes and collective outcomes. Why? We focused on the collective side because Bernard and I are intrinsically motivated, individualist, capitalist types. We're going to do whatever we got to do regardless of external motivations, regardless of external outcomes. We're just going to do what we got to do. However, part of growing up is understanding that you're part of a system that you may be responsible for. Maybe you have a kid and all of a sudden you start thinking, I would like to effect some change. Or maybe you have lived a certain kind of life and you've seen over and over and over again that there's some people that don't get certain things that come naturally to you or certain experience that you've had and you want to share it. So you go ahead and you share it, just like I share my music or I'm sharing thoughts and ideas on this stream about how to how to influence people, how to persuade people, how to sell, and on, or just sharing ideas in general. Okay, part of growing up is to see that big picture. And I think that it is incumbent upon people, those kinds of people whom can quote unquote make it out, whom are intrinsically motivated, and they're the ones that quote unquote can make it out of the hood, or they have immigrant mentality, or whatever it may be. It is incumbent upon them to take hold of the reins, right? Take hold of the organs of influence that are out there, whether it be BET or the church or so on and so forth, and begin to instantiate some of these collective actions in order to see collective change in collective outcomes. Because these collective outcomes do affect us, even those of us whom can quote unquote alpha our way through it, right? It does affect us in the sense of reputation, right? You can have an ethnic reputation, a racial reputation, so on and so forth, tribal reputation, and you may want to change that. Plus, hey, generations down the line, or your children, for example, may not have the same kind of psychological makeup. They may be of the sort that are definitely affected by external circumstances. So that's what we were doing today. What do we want to hear for our closeout song? 1, for Battle Within. 2, for Run. Okay? Those are 2 songs so far that I'm using. We could have other songs later on. Message Noir, of course. He's given me fractions and multiples and wanted me to pull out the calculator to do the radical sign. Find the square root of 4. 1 for Battle Within and 2 for Run. And thank you. Again, if you're new, like, subscribe, hit the bell button and all. Like, subscribe, bell button and all. Like, subscribe, bell button and all. L. Boyd, one woman, one vote. You can't be voting often, okay? You know, it's not Chicago over here. I don't know where you're from, but she cast like 17 votes for one. I guess you really do like it, but we're gonna go with a democracy, all right? We're gonna go with the democracy, and it seems like 2s have it, all right? Crushing on the shore, relentless in the war. The legions in our hearts, shed waters in our pores. The spirit and the flesh, the emotions that arrest. The cerebral will contest, propelling the unrest. Frequent darkness in internal conversation, while the factions in our soul pick up the weapon. Many actions backed by dubious motivation. Many wolves seeking sheepish coronation. With the preachers ringing out standing ovation. Give me the tool and make me dash them with the weapon. Word 'em up.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, could either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannot could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners. Go. Run, 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 make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, come, make we get it. Calling out your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. Run for the hills, let the will lead the mind. For living is the thrill with the doubt left behind. Amidst all the wicked, there is beauty to behold. We are still standing intrepid from the depths of our soul. The hands of the steady cleave the rose from the corn. The sweat of the weary brings us close to the dawn. The motion of the wheel brings the light to the mind. Be aligned, it's divine. Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling on your daughters and your sons, they come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, come, make we get it. Calling on your daughters and your sons, they come forget it. Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. Run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and